This story begins with the fact that the invasion of the world happened, once monsters from another kingdom rained down through the portal. Humanity was faced with the threat of destruction, and at first people could not oppose them. But suddenly those who could repulse the monsters who pushed to humanity also came from the portal. The salvation in the person of warriors, who were in a hurry to prevent disaster and complete destruction, was given. Representatives of the world of swords and magic, which were dressed in heavy armor, also appeared in this world. Noticing their opponents, the monster was immediately soared into the air to fight the Einhearts. Thanks to internal energy, they applied martial arts so that the battle was on equal terms. In addition to people in armor, the world of martial arts Murim, who did not want to lag, also entered into battle. Demons arrived from the land of Gina. This is a name that in itself reflects hell and all its horror. And people who once ruled the earth rushed into suffering in such a chaos, unable to repulse them. The monsters were happy with light booty, which could be gained almost anytime anywhere. However, soon the awakened appeared that they challenged the system, getting superpowers. They saved people while those who arrived from Murim fought fiercely with the demons, not allowing them to rule here. Warriors complained about people because they were told and interfered with underfoot while the battle was going on. Awakened people began to be called players, and they did everything to help civilians. Players sometimes complained that people are affected by problems that they always neglect the rules. Others were not surprised by such an outcome, because few can truly assess the level of danger. They were also unhappy that Murim's warriors were not happy with their presence, although they had a magic circle of high rank. Noticing how one of the monsters approached the car in which there were people, one of the players activated the status window. In front of him was a 3-headed werewolf, a monster of the middle rank, after which he filed a request for urgent evacuation. But he did not understand what the rest were doing, after which he urged everyone to go forward to catch this crazy dog. Iron was asked to stop, but the guy was already rushing forward, releasing a hook so as not to break. By radio communications, he was informed that a volcano guild should deal with the monsters of the middle rank. The guy knew this, but noticed that they clearly could not cope, so he decided that they needed help. In his opinion, this was simply called real support, after which he directed the hook towards the monster. When the hook fell into the throat of the animal, Iron used an exclusive skill, due to which his characteristics increased. The monster began to kick in pain, while the frightened woman with a child shouted with fear, sitting in the car. For a while the guy tried to curb the monster, but his strength gradually began to end. Then he asked a friend to make connections as soon as possible to cut off this dog's head so that they ended quickly. The comrade rushed forward, although I knew that Iron never listened to him. It was not very difficult to survive with him. He always covers him like a real friend, but this time the guy did not attack the monster, but was behind Iron. And this time he was told not to interfere with living and dying, after which the guy used the skill of the tank, Mega Blow. When Iron felt a chopping blow to his back, then in his head there were only thoughts of betrayal. He fell forward face right in front of the monster, which only brutally after the hook in his throat. His former comrades asked to catch him, after which they announced that they needed to run rather. Iron looked at his friends for the last time, and a girl who was flooded with tears, looking at him. At that moment he realized that everyone to whom he trusted all this time simply betrayed him and threw him away. But when Iron opened his eyes, he noticed that he was still flying his nose in the ground, feeling painful landing. A displeased man stood above him who kicked him, forcing him to do something faster. They began to ask him about a high-ranking top player, while the guy tried to understand what was happening at all. Suddenly he noticed that there was a burial of the corpses of the monsters of the Guild of the Volcano, which was like a real hell. Having examined other people, he realized that he was already here and first came here 5 years ago. Suddenly they again stepped on his face, believing that he would trample him as there is nothing to do. Iron wanted to cause a status window, but nothing happened, although before that the system worked without fail. But when consciousness began to leave him, the guy was surprised to notice the window in which he was chosen as a source of chaos. His choice could lead to the destruction of the world, but now he only wanted to stop this pain. He immediately decided to accept the proposal, after which he ended up in some astral place where there was no pain. Opening his eyes, the guy ultimately saw the legendary creatures ruling the world, 3 lords. Before his eyes were the long-forgotten legends of the 3 worlds, which no one saw firsthand. The first was a huge man, the King of Silver, who captured the entire continent with one blow. Move on. The second was the Elder, the Lord of the World Einhart, who out of the heavens with one wave of the sword, the King of the Sword. The third was a beautiful girl, the Goddess of Murders, destroying the divinity, the Lord of Gina, the Queen of Demons. These were 3 lords that were imprisoned in the world of chaos, who were in infinity aimlessly. Now they were wondering if this guy is like this source of chaos, asking him to look at them. This was the first time when another person fell into their world, who also remained in ignorance. However, the Queen of the Demons was not surprised, because he was so suddenly dragged here without explaining anything. Before Iron, there was still a window of status, which asked for this path, becoming a source of chaos. The guy wondered if he could take revenge on his traitor, that they are now calmly enjoying life. Meanwhile, the lords carefully examined the child, considering that they were ignored. They considered it rude. As if reading his thoughts, one of them asked, "I think if the guy, that he took revenge, he will feel relief. If he was elected a source of chaos I got here, then everything is simple. The guy longs for the destruction of the world, and now it is possible." Iron really felt calmer, immediately feeling that he wanted destruction. It turns out that in this case, retaliation will no longer be from him, and from the chaos itself, which he will become in the future. He will be devoid of body and consciousness, and only receive the news that the world was finally destroyed. The Queen of the Demons became interested in whether this would be enough for him, and whether he will have enough this revenge. The guy did not understand what he had to do, to which they answered him, that they would allow him to take revenge with his own hands. After all, he must fully feel what the murder is, and at least once enjoy this feeling. But how he can do something with this miserable body, which lost all his strength and became slave. However, Vladika invited him to accept the strength from them, and then he will be able to conclude chaos himself within himself. Retribution will no longer be a problem, and if you set the goal, it is possible to become the lord of the world. The lords unanimously decided to help the man, but the guy just needs to adopt everything from them. The goal of the three lords, yours who wanted him to become their student, was now not so important for Iron. The main thing is that he can take revenge, so he decided to call them his teachers, who will help him go this path. The King of the Sword was surprised that it was not difficult to convince him that it seemed very strange to him. Since then, Iron has become a student of three lords only to take revenge on all his offenders. After that, he began to train in a world, devoid of time and the concept of death. These were long, heavy, and ruthless training, some of which were even worse than death. But after some time, he was able to conclude chaos inside himself, after which he woke up in the real world. The same man who pounded him again complained that the guy was really sleeping in a shuttle pit. Iron realized that time stopped immediately with the start of training, after which he sharply dodged the blow. Without wasting time, he grabbed the boss by the leg, after which he used a new force and threw him away. The guy again decided to try to open the status window, but there was no reaction. His body remained in the same condition, and he felt that he was not enough for his strength to perform something serious. If not for the words of teachers, he would have thought that he had just dreamed of the past 100 years of training. Van warned that when he returned to the world, he would probably lose all the forces received from them, all because the world simply cannot withstand such power, and now there is also chaos inside it. Therefore, when he returns, his body will have to rebuild under the fact that he will endure strength. While he was thinking about this, the boss got to his feet, after which he rushed with his fists on Iron, deciding to punish. However, it was nothing compared to acquired forces, so he easily stopped his fist. Chol Taiming was a moron that he had mocked him for the past 5 years, at the 5th level. But with such a body he will never lose, even if his strength was not enough to accept chaos. Even the village can defeat a simple enemy if he takes control of the thirst for murder. In the end, thirsty for murder, this is about the inner power that you need to be able to control. Forgetting morality, Iron easily turned his hand away, forcing him to scream in pain, after which he hit him in his stomach. The boss immediately fell on his back, feeling acute pain throughout his body, which did not allow him to rise again. The rest of the people who looked at this were very scared, and did not dare to approach them. The clumsy cruelty led the boss only to resistance, to whom he could not repulse. And fear is what makes his way to the bones, to be honest, for everything that he did with Iron all this time. From now on, this guy will shake with fear at the sight of him, and the rest will also follow his example. However, now he had to hurry until the people from the Volcano Guild noticed this revolution. When he grabbed the chain, one of the old people asked where he was going, but the guy simply ignored him. He broke the wall with a strong wave of the chain, which led instead of the burial of monsters. There was a lot of toxic smells emanating from corpses, which did not make a pleasant location here. No one risks approaching them close because this place was like a real hell. Here Iron decided to reborn, after which, under the dumbfounded glances of people, jumped down. At first he was a little scared, but then he acquired confidence when he plunged into the bloody abyss. It was an ideal place for honing the technique of a bloody demon, which was taught by 3 lords. Van taught him that there are various secret techniques, for example, the divine technique of a volcano. But the technique that he will learn is almost 5 times the most strongly. It is necessary to steal what belongs to another and assign to himself. This is dark magic that absorbs life from the blood to accumulate internal power, the technique of a bloody demon. To use this technique, You need to create a dentist within yourself so that everything will work as it should. Dantian is a source of power for the Silver World. It looks like a magical core of players. But if it is not from the Silver World, then this is simply impossible. But there was another way. It is not so important if it takes tens or hundreds of years. You just need to continue to study until it succeeds. When Iron began to be supplied with the blood of murdered monsters, he immediately felt incredible pain. After thousands of deaths in the end, he was able to create a dentist within himself, completely changing the structure of the body. Iron clearly remembers the process, and in the first step, it was necessary to collect blood and energy around him. The second step was the creation of Dantian, which completely destroyed his body and created again. The technique of the bloody demon was unbearably painful, and there were few people who could survive it. The pain that he felt in the process is undoubtedly far beyond this world, but he was able to survive it. Monsters arrived at his screams, which smelled of fresh blood, which attracted them so much. The reason why the passage is prohibited into this zone, not only in the toxic air, standing due to corpses, the work of mutants created on the basis of a dead energy emanating from the bodies. In other words, this is the den of the dead. But when one of the monsters wanted to attack the guy, his head was also captured in a strong grip. Each their attack is not worth it, and it is impossible to kill such a zombie until you cut off your head. If he were in his old body, he immediately became just another dinner, but now everything was different. He used the technique of a bloody demon. Iron easily destroyed a zombie that did not even understand what had happened. This is the kingdom of scarlet blood. Here you can absorb the blood of the enemy and turn it into its own energy. This has its own advantage, where the remains of blood and iron are collected, and a steel ball is formed. Now the guy finally felt alive again, and then he was not going to give up so easily. This is the kingdom of scarlet blood. Here you can absorb the blood of the enemy and turn it into its own energy. This has its own advantage, where the remains of blood and iron are collected, and a steel ball is formed. When Iron created it, he immediately sent towards the monsters who did not dare to approach him. Destroying one of them, the guy decided to absorb them without leaving a trace, after which he began to create new balls. Zombies began to lose their heads one by one, but they were not going to retreat, which became their mistake. The guy created the bloody spheres, sending them to opponents, because of which you could not get close to him. Now they were only his prey, and he was not going to miss any of them to use their blood. Iron was surrounded by monsters, but he did not feel a drop of danger, because he was several times stronger than them. When the bloody massacre ended, the guy decided that it was not so bad, examining his hand covered with blood. At this time, behind him was a huge monster, which was much stronger than all previous ones. However, Iron managed to react in time, dodging and bouncing from an incredibly strong blow. It was a zombie troll, and it was precisely that level that he expected, so such an opponent, but on the contrary, inspired. Meanwhile, members of the Volcano Guild arrived here, noticing a man who was completely broken and was sure that he would die. At that very moment, the subordinate called other guards present during the incident. When the commander gathered the authorities, he ordered to report on what happened to that guy. Taimin decided to teach a lesson in a cool slave. I suddenly grabbed his hand and turned it out. In general, some details were not interesting, but whether it was known that the slave stared strangely at Taimina. Perhaps it was a thirst for murder, but it is available only to military masters with internal energy. When asked where this slave, they answered him that he committed suicide, but the man did not observe his body anywhere. He went to the monster's burial zone, and the body probably had decomposed due to poisonous smells. Suddenly, the commander grabbed his face, realized that the guy lied and reported on his suicide so as not to go there. It seemed to him that the subordinate did not understand at all why he was here. Nothing excites the beating of the guard of the slave. The oddities were to feel how the trace of the slave was destroyed by itself. At this time, the guard lied about suicide without even finding the body, and now he literally deserved death. The boss shouted loudly and apologized, but this was not enough, because of which the commander was enough to squeeze his hand. Blood immediately sprayed in all directions, and the guard's body fell lifelessly to the ground under the views of other subordinates. He ordered the rest to choose. Either it is waiting to take into account the same, or they will go to look for the body of that guy. Everyone unconditionally agreed to search, after which, pushing, they went towards the burials. These guards will still die from the poison earlier than they find the body, so later they themselves will go there. The commander was on a platoon from the situation, and now any trifle could angry him. 2 weeks later, Iron continued to fight with a zombie, absorbing their blood, thereby draining with energy. He absorbed almost all the bodies and the mutants that appeared, thereby cleansing this place from poisons and corpses. Now he has reached the second stage of the technique of the bloody demon, which significantly increased its strength, and because of which his hair color was replaced. Suddenly he turned, felt that the strongest stream of poison emanated from there. The strength of the second stage, in fact and blood, consists in the concentration of force and explosion, capable of destroying the wall. This was enough to open a passage to that place, and from where it blew a strong poison. The resistance of one's own blood to iodine is several times stronger than on the steps of the bloody essence. If he had not reached the step of his own blood, nothing would have left of his body. But all the main preparations were made. Now it was time to move on to his main goal: transcendental creatures which were very dangerous. It is better to never face monsters of a high level of danger, but among all such creatures were the most noble. These were dragons, and one day one came out of the portal who dumbfounded people with his power. After a large amount of time, a snake appeared, full of rage, which at first glance was indestructible. Many players risked their lives, challenging him, and they managed to defeat him in a miraculous way. The world was captured by chaos, but the corpse of the dragon, which was like a treasure, attracted the most attention. His blood turned out to be the best material in alchemy. A unique weapon could be made from bones. But the body is also full of poison, rage, and magical power. From one touch, the whole body can melt. For this reason, a burial zone was created, where the corpse can be cleaned naturally through the slaves that they sent there. Therefore, Iron decided to take revenge on the Volcano Guild from the heart, using the technique of a bloody demon on the dragon's corpse. When Move-An heard about the dragon Embryo, who was surprised that the guy was going to absorb him, thinking, the teacher concluded that he really would help him restore a lot of strength. Then a smile appeared on his face when he imagined how terrible and painful this action would be. Now Iron was on the verge of losing consciousness. If he had not trained with teachers, he would have died a long time ago. But his internal energy is rapidly accumulating from the blood. Let the dragon have long been dead. His strength is still with him. He suppressed internal energy using the technique of his own blood, but the tanks are still full. If it stops now, it will die from a sudden flow of energy. But if it continues to absorb, it will simply explode. The guy did not expect this, but could not have imagined that this was the final stage, and now he needed to do something. The Queen of the Demons tried to answer the question that if she does not succeed in absorbing the entire power of the dragon. Dragons even in hell are very revered. An ordinary person can be difficult to accept so much strength. However, the answer to his question was very simple. He needed to become a dragon himself to absorb such power. Iron could not believe that it was possible. He received so much from them, but was still surprised. He wants to get his strength back, and the dragon is only another step, but not the final result. Judging by what he learned from the teacher, he must go through another transformation, because nothing is impossible. The guy even absorbed chaos, so he cost nothing to cope with the dragon, but the body was literally roaring in pain. Move-An suggested that the dragon reincarnation was a rather good method for gaining his strength. In the Silver Kingdom, there is even a special name for those who get the body of the dragon. And now Iron could proudly wear the body of the dragon bone when he could get all its strength. At this time, the guild commander his wards entered the burial, but immediately froze in shock. They tried to understand what was happening, because all the bodies disappeared, and there was practically no trace of the cadaverous smell. Even a guard with the highest level was not capable of this, so it was clear that something had happened here. Suddenly he was interested in the question of what happened to the dragon's body, who was also in this burial. The commander ordered the guild to immediately report that all the corpses were gone. Subordinates immediately accepted the order. As soon as he moved away by several meters, he noticed a black sphere in front of him, which flew in front of his face. He tried to dodge, immediately exploded on the atmosphere, thereby giving him a chance to survive. The next second, the explosion erupted, and the commander was able to survive thanks to the subordinate, whom he put up in front of him. The man thought that if this happens literally a couple of times, nothing would remain from the burial zone. Suddenly they told him that he became the commander of one of the branches of the guild, but he was still hiding behind other people's backs. Iron discovered in front of him the first traitor, Kim Shin Han, whom he intended to destroy right now. The guy immediately recognized the man standing in front of him, unable to believe that he was still alive, and whether he was definitely. It was sad that he would not recognize him only because he looks different or simply does not want to admit it. He heard that he sold him and became a leader, but it turns out he became even more cowardly than he was before. The commander immediately asked him to shut up, after which he ordered the Black Hawks to kill him immediately. Fulfilling the order, the Wars rushed forward to attack a person who dared to be rude to their commander. Black Hawks are a special detachment appointed to leaders. Their level of skills is usually higher than 90, and they themselves are experts. The main technique of Black Hawks trained to kill was the secrecy, which they mastered to the ideal. Of course, invisibility carries many dangers, but this is only until they are visible. However, the guy clearly felt behind him one warrior who wanted to get to him from the back. He created another black sphere, directing it back, because he was able to feel the inner energy of any person. This was enough to see everything that is happening around and to fight off attacks from all sides. The third step of the bloody demon technique is black blood. A ball of black blood shoots with many nuclei. He absorbs the internal energy of the enemy and then explodes, thereby causing damage to the region. Black Hawks were weak opponents for a man who took possession of the technique of a bloody demon. At that very moment, Iron created several more black spheres, after which he scattered them around him, attacking the soldiers. Shin Han covered his face from the explosion, trying to figure out where this guy had such a skill. Then he activated the skill of searching for information, deciding to learn about Iron as much as possible. But at the same moment, a red notice surfaced in front of him, and his head began to hurt sharply. The system gave out a strange mistake that the commander had never seen. In addition with this, the pain became stronger. Iron noticed that he was dying of curiosity, and wants to know where he got such a power. Shin Hong never acts. Without first studying everything about my opponent, I then come up with tactics. It was very similar to the main tank of the guild, which was the one who inflicted a mortal blow to the guy. Grabbing the sword, the commander said that he was no longer the tank of Wim Shin Hong, whom he knew. Now he was the leader of the raid of the guild's Skasan, and now he could not afford to lose. In his opinion, Iron always considered himself the best, and pretended to be the most intelligent. And now he was wondering how the guy would behave, rushing forward again, not thinking about his comrades. This is what Iron is going to do, after which he directed the black sphere towards the enemy. Shin Han reacted instantly, putting a sword in front of him as a defense, but this was difficult for him. When the explosion erupted, Iron was behind him, and again, noting that the tank had almost not changed. However, he did not expect anything else from the Guild of Shasan, who was able to only boast and wasted. At that very moment, the commander activated the white shield, which is why a stone rose from under the ground, protecting it. He again demanded that the guy shut up, after which he waved his sword, from which he eagerly dodged. The commander decided that this was the end, but Iron created another sphere, directing it towards the tank. Shin Hong decided to recapture her with a sword, but unsuccessfully, because of which he needed to quickly come up with a new plan. The force of the explosion threw it with a shockwave, but did not cause any serious damage. The breathless commander tried to understand where he got so much power, since he was so calm during the battle. He certainly lost his strength, and this is simply impossible, and now stands here as if nothing had happened. Iron, that his answer will not give anything to such a cowardly traitor as him, and it will be just an empty conversation. The commander again rushed to the attack, while Iron, standing still, put his hand in front of him. Such attempts were useless, but Shin Hong decided to eat the guy with a stone wall, preventing him from taking advantage of the spheres. The man was sure that he had nothing but these black balls, because if it were otherwise, he would not have kept in a distance. If he prevents him from retreating, then Iron cannot do anything, after which the tank stuck the sword into the wall. The next second, he used night weapons, and a hot flame broke inside the wall. Even the best Rainer will not be able to survive such a blow. And finally, this stubborn geek died. But when the cloud of dust was dispelled, Shin Hong watched in shock how Iron stood in the same place, a whole and unharmed. While the commander tried to understand how this was possible, the guy rushed forward, grabbing his face tightly. Instead of killing, Iron decided to eat his blood, realizing that it was too simple. House flourishes on the destruction of other worlds. It goes beyond the limits of time and space in search of a source. And the worlds on which chaos condenses are absorbed and meet their death quickly and ruthlessly. Iron trained for more than 100 years to conclude chaos within himself, trying to overcome his new path. He did everything he could. If he still doesn't work out, then there was nothing else to do. Outside of this place, everything has already been decided, so he only needs to go forward, without hesitation about the consequences. Suddenly, Move On stopped him, deciding to recognize his name, but now there was no smile on his face. Iron was sincerely surprised that he decided to ask about this only after 100 years. The point was that he was just too used to him, and once he was called a heartless ghost. But even he managed to attach himself to a person whose name did not even bother to find out. Interested in the teacher, the guy pierced severe pain, and the Queen of Demons noticed that he succeeded. Iron immediately changed in the face, and it began to put into sleep, which was very difficult to resist. The teacher explained that such an influence of chaos, his body resists this incredible power. He corrodes his spirit, and from now on he will constantly pursue the nightmares. Suddenly, the guy straightened up, being sure that if he gets into the nightmare, the chaos would awaken again. He expected something similar, so he immediately asked the teachers to kill him, which caused their surprise. Move-On did not expect that this guy knew everything, to which he had heard the questions, whose student he was, in their opinion. Iron knew that they wanted to conclude chaos inside the body and completely destroy it. Their main goal was to destroy chaos while he was imprisoned, and could not release force. The King of the Sword did not understand why he contacted them. if he knew everything, and still went to suicide. Iron was devoted and remained with nothing, because of which he could not trust anyone, so he had no choice. But from them he felt a long, forgotten warmth, because they treated him as an equal. Not retribution for him does nothing else mean, and he only wanted to return to them the concern that they showed to him. And now his last request was to hear their names, which he also did not know all this time. Muvan turned out to be Shin Yu Vol, the king of the sword was Shigard von Damien, and the queen of demons was Bergen. Now the guy had no more regrets, and he, Iron, was ready to die here for his teachers. But suddenly Shiag swam to him, putting his hand on his shoulder and saying that he would not die here. The teachers were unanimous with the fact that he is their children and the student, so they cannot let him die. They simply could not afford to kill him with their own hands, because they themselves created it. Iron was indignant because in this case they will leave their mission, and their entire plan would go crash. Bergen explained that they will share the time of the chaos of the internal and concludes it together. Chaos in it is formed by their techniques, so their strength is able to withstand this for some time. Spatial bindings are weakened, and he will return to where he was a place, but the guy was interested in the fate of teachers. As it turned out, they would be sealed somewhere deep, and now they were ready to say goodbye to him. Then they sent him to the real world, finally asking him to never look for them and go their own way. He was curious how far he could have a force that he received from his mistakes. He felt her greatness, being those who once almost became a high-level wound. Iron wondered how this would affect others, not on his teachers, but in public. But it is too simple. Kim Shin Hong, maybe not the highest rank, but clearly above 150 levels, and he could easily defeat him. If you can find other techniques, except for a bloody demon, it will be impossible to win it. It will be difficult to do even the leader of the Volcano Guild or high-ranking experts of the Silver Detachment. Moreover, people from Einhart, hell, and even those who are so proudly standing on the top of the world. These were 5 people, but each of them had an incredible force that lifted them up. This is a revenge planned for hundreds of years, but now that she is right here, he is not much delighted. Suddenly, Shin Hong, who was still alive, asked to spare him because they simply had to betray him. The guy was surprised by such a statement, but the commander explained that otherwise they would have died. There was no other way to save them all but to kill a person who decided to act arbitrarily. Iron did not believe that he did this to save him, because he became a captain while he suffered from day to day. At that very moment, the guy began to create a black sphere in the face of the commander, who promised to tell him where the others. He begged him for mercy, promising that he would help him avenge, and this made Iron think. He betrayed him once and now again speaks of betrayal, but already on the other side. Grabbing his face, the guy promised that everyone would hear his death, after which he asked to wait for them in hell. After some time, the guy climbed out, where one of the workers noticed him, but did not expect to see him. Iron easily broke the chain, which was blocked by the entrance, thereby showing his strength. Slaves and guards intuitively understood everything, because in front of them stood a man who broke chains and got out of the abyss. In addition, he struck the Black Hawks and Kim Shin Han, who in their opinion was very strong. If not for the teacher, he would have been waiting for the same worthless fate. They will die anyway, so he will help them. The guards and slaves rushed to flee in fear, but the guy had already aimed at them black spheres that reached the goal. One of the men fell to the ground and grabbed his head, screaming that he did not want to die, when he suddenly felt something strange. Other people who were also frightened began to inspect their body, noting that the lab label disappeared. At that very moment, Iron directed the spheres up, thereby destroying the ceiling to get out. The guy announced that either they would die here, buried under the wreckage, or get out alive. The choice is for them. He himself began to start from falling stones, thereby getting outward, leaving the slaves to escape. When he first met the teacher, and had only sought to destroy the world, but now something has changed. Lee, who has matured their victim, he finally realized what he had to do, because of which a plan was born in his head. This world, full of chaos, will be absorbed and assigned, and thereby responsible for all its vile acts. After a while, other members of the guild arrived at the scene in order to personally assess the situation. Jung and Wu, the leader of the Red Plum of the Guild of the Volcano, heard a report, but did not think that this was true. They gave the leader of the leader to some beggar, and now the guilds have a lot of problems. He was also interested in the interrogation of slaves, but his wards could not please him with good news. It seems that they don't remember anything at all, and someone just wiped them memories so that they could not testify. It was also strange that the marks of slaves disappeared, and there were traces of the magic circle. The leader was sure that this someone was clearly not lower than the level of the master, so he decided to ask some more traces. However, no traces of a combat master or player were discovered. It could be the work of the magicians of Einhart or the demons of Gina. In Wu, he was inclined to the second option, guessing about their goal, At the same time, another subordinate ran up to him. The worried guy announced that the corpse of a dragon had disappeared, which no one could approach before. However, the leader expected this, and if this is all hell, they will be able to use a corpse without cleansing it. He ordered to contact the headquarters so that they investigate every trace of priesthood over the past year. In Wu, he returned his gaze to the body of Shin Han. He was informed that he had come to see the death of Rabbi Iron. If the Iron that was about to become a high-level wanker did not touch it, he would now be very famous. When asked about his corpse, the leader heard the answer that about a month ago he went to the abyss. He must then be dead, because his body would simply not withstand the poison from a pile of monsters. Having made conclusions for himself, the guy turned around, ordering the subordinate to finish it quickly. They also needed to find the remaining, and subordinates immediately accepted the order. Meanwhile, Iron reached the Tondaman area that he was in Seoul and entered the bar, and people around were already discussing that they attacked the burial place of the Guild of the Volcano. There are already rumors that these are the intrigues of hell, and it seems that they urgently needed the corpse of the dragon. It turns out that the lull came to an end, because they still contacted the Guild of the Volcano, which does not forgive this. Everyone spoke only guilds, although since they attacked one of the 3 largest guilds, this is quite expected. Soon they all have a lid, and you just need to wait, because now Iron is not going to stand aside. First, you need to find the monastery of the teacher Move On. This is the most effective way to become stronger. For such as him, this is the only way to find people. At the same moment, the bartender turned to him. The guy ordered Colois with ice, asking him to make him stronger and prettier, which immediately interested the senior bartender. He went to the employee and said that he would figure it out, asking him to decompose the supply in the pantry. Then the manager asked the visitor about the ancient principles, deciding that he had just left the portal after 5 years. Iron increased this number to 100, but the man accepted these words seriously, considering that he was some kind of demon. The guy immediately began to deny this, because there is no difference, and they still pour it here. Chan Ho Sok, the head of the Seoul branch of the black market, relaxed a little, asking what he wants. Iron without hesitation replied that he needed work, but the manager was important to know the details. Now any work was supposed to be suitable for the guy, the main D rank or higher. Opening the box under the bar, Hosoku decided that he had something suitable for him. Getting a significant stack of papers, the man threw her in front of the guy, offering to make a choice himself. Carefully studying the papers, Iron with dissatisfaction noticed that here it was necessary to steal people. The manager added that it is necessary to lure newcomers, lock in the portal, and then demand a fight from parents. Victims are children of wealthy families, so there are a lot of such ones. A job for work. 200 million with a commission of 30%. Having familiarized himself with all the vacancies, the guy began to fold the papers back, considering that the work is sloppy. The manager reached out at the hidden gun under the counter, asking if he would get a job. Sometimes there are idiots who come with stupid dreams of justice, trying to cover their place. But they do not think what will happen to those who will be left without work, and to whom they will throw their anger. Looking at the pistol directed in the face, Iron asked Hosoka not to worry because he likes everything. Then he pointed to people in the hall, asking to convey to these people so that they would reduce their thirst for blood. The man was surprised that the visitor noticed this, so he decided that he could entrust him with his work. Having extended the phone, the manager said that he would contact him soon, so he should be ready. Then Hosok invited the guy to drink, since he came to the bar, but he politely refused. Iron frowned, explaining that if he drank and falls asleep, there would be no one to survive here. The manager decided that he did not understand the jokes, while the guy turned around and headed for the exit. Ho Juice thought that this man was full of illusion. With such a pace, he did not remain long. Meanwhile, in Dasandan, the city of Namyanju, there was a D-rank portal which was guarded by 2 men. Then players began to converge to him, who joyfully greeted each other. And Min Hong affectionately greeted Chol Ho, who stood nearby with his team. The players approached them that they would join the group. They are like the closest to him, so that they need to be kind to them. Chol Ho asked a comrade what expectations he had from his first such operation. The interlocutor smiled, but it was clear that he was nervous and worried, hoping that everything would go smoothly. However, he was asked not to worry because his comrade's with him for more than 3 years, and the portal of the D rank is a trifle. He also pointed to 2 other people who decided to join them. They were wanderers. Min Hong, who was without that nervous, was very surprised by such characters in their group. He was again asked not to worry, because they are fighting masters, and they have been with him for more than 3 years. To worry is quite normal, because the Chinese are known for the fact that they are no worse than hellish demons. Therefore, even in the black market, Iron was presented as a wanderer who does not inspire anyone. But among these people there are some no surprise on your face without you. It was a girl from the Min Han group. It seems that he finally found the first person whom he could make his supporter. Toward evening, after hunting, They arranged a halt around the fire to discuss the events that happened to them. Minhan was happy that thanks to Chol Ho, his experience glasses increased significantly. The guy offered to hunt tomorrow, although they came without telling his parents, because it was a chance to get a lot of points. However, Chol Ho already thought out everything, and found a place where they can hunt calmly, without fear for life. Tomorrow they finally know the real action, but for now they can rest, and not deny themselves anything. But when the young group went to the tent, Chol and his team smiled maliciously, pleased with deception. Meanwhile, the girl who was not surprised to come to Iron, learning about the Wanderers. When he nodded, inviting her to sit down nearby, she immediately began to ask him about the work of a Wanderer. She was wondering what level he is, if he was a master of martial arts, because today he did not particularly participate in the hunt. The guy explained that he was very rudely asking about the level, which she did not know, because she was still a newcomer. Carefully examining the guy, she noticed that he was not even trying to pretend that she was excited. Then the girl decided to at least find out his name, but when she saw his gaze, she immediately stopped short. Looking away, the guy introduced himself, but the girls were still uncomfortable from his gaze. Suddenly, she thought that this name sounds familiar, but she certainly could not remember where she had heard him before. Suddenly, a friend came up to Yun, announcing that now her turn and she could go to rest. The girl decided to leave, even though the conversation was short, but she liked to talk with this guy. He did not seem to her a bad person, but for some reason a strange and inexplicable feeling does not leave her. The next day, they continued the hunt, noting that the portal would close very soon. If you do not leave now, then the next time it will work out only after the murder of the boss, and they will have to sweat. Min Hong proposed to go to him because for Chol, Ho Boss should be a slight goal. He is also a normal player if he guesses each time, afraid to get hurt, and will not become stronger. He asked not to worry about him, offering to go to the boss to defeat her together. Chol Ho was pleased that the guy fell into his trap, offering to first fight the approaching orcs. Min Han was very happy, because he had been waiting for this for so long, after which he grabbed the weapon. His team immediately rushed into battle, after which the formidable battle of players and orcs began. While Chol Ho gave a sign to his friend, one of the orcs used a shield to tie Min Honorable. They were stronger than he thought, and now the guy was in great danger. He tried to ask his comrade to help him, because his team clearly could not cope with the task. However, he was replied that there is also enough problem here, so he must try to cope himself. At this time, one of the orcs was already approaching him, lugging a huge sword. Without thinking twice, the guy reached for his pocket, regretting that he would have to use this in such a situation. Min Han put up a scroll in front of him, after which he tore it, activating a fiery blow. A huge stream of flame burst out of the scroll, frying the orc and throwing it a certain distance. At that very moment, Chol Ho ran up to him and began to apologize, gathering that he was also overwhelmed by the OGR. He was lucky to find the strongest scroll, but his father said to use it only in extreme cases, because he could only be applied once. Chol Ho realized that he had no more such items, because this thing was quite expensive. Having decided that this is the perfect moment, the guy put his own scroll in front of him, thereby surprising the guy. Suddenly chains burst from this scroll, which immediately chopped the dumbfounded Min Honorable. But before he had time to ask what was happening, how his comrades were connected in the same way. At that very moment, Chol Ho and his team came up to him, rejoicing in his magnificent plan. Min Han decided that this was some kind of stupid joke, asking him to untie him. But suddenly he got a slap in the face, and heard that he had a sawdust in his head, probably because of rich ancestors. If he still thinks that this is a joke, then you need to explain that first they will cut off one ear. The frightened Min Han asked them to stop, when suddenly one of his comrades Chol Ko cut off the sword of the Yun Ha. The leader reacted instantly, trying to understand how this girl was able to get out of the chains. While she was smiling, the guy was surprised to notice the aura of the sword that acted on his blade. It was obvious that Yun Ha is a master of martial arts, so magic did not work, but his skill showed it as a player. However, he himself did not look like a D-rank player. In fact, he is a first-class S-rank. Suddenly, one of the Chinese asked him to move away, because fighting masters should fight against themselves. Judging by the aura of the sword, she, like him, is at the top, and therefore their forces should be approximately the same. Her spirit was amazing, but the question arose whether she could cope with everyone. Now in front of Yun, there was an excellent master of martial arts and 3 C-rank. The ratio was so-so. The monastery rushed forward, deciding that since she was not going to attack, the first step will be behind him. The girl only fought off his attacks, looking at his crazy smile with which he struck. However, it should not be underestimated, because she is not just a master of martial arts, and therefore began to attack. Yi-hun focused on one enemy, but quickly noticed that someone wants to attack her from the back. Rubbing the distance, she looked at all rivals. although she would not cope with this wanderer. Suddenly, Chal No turned to Iron, who did not catch monsters all this time, and if he wants money, he should catch the girl. Without answering anything, the guy slowly headed for Yunha, shortly stopping the battle with his appearance. The girl frowned because starting from yesterday she was scared to even look into his eyes. She was still interested in knowing who he was, but it was extremely dangerous to fight him. Iron remembered how his teacher said that he was a master of the divine demonic cult. It was strange because the guy heard only about the usual demonic cult, but not about the divine. However, the point was that the demonic cult went from the divine cult. Although the demonic cult is the main sworn enemy of all guilds, and they are known for this that bring to the world of destruction. Muvan was surprised that the guy was looking at his teacher like that, but Iron did not mean this. After the teacher left, the Combat Alliance began to spread propaganda that he had pleased. They are just miserable creatures who decided to change the truth in order to get benefits from it. Therefore, when the guy returns to the real world, he must definitely deal with them. And now, looking at Yunha, Iron was sure that she could circle around the finger of others, but not his. Now there was no doubt, and he felt that this force belonged to the demonic cult. In the black market, you can find the remaining followers of the demonic cult. They say they save abducted people and lure to their side, teaching them. Iron did not think that it would be so easily found, but these deceivers themselves turned up by the arm. Another monastery was unhappy that the guy was not going to attack, but he asked him to shut up. He tried to roughly explain why a man should be silent, thereby insulting him. Chal Ho was also surprised, because he hired this guy in the black market so that he would clean everything behind them. When the monastery heard this, he immediately realized that he could personally beat him, and he would not happen for it. But when he waved his sword, he immediately broke, and Iron had already created several black spheres. The man could not believe that the sword filled with energy was so easily broken. It was clear that this guy was much stronger than him. Maybe he even had a transcendental level. Suddenly, one of the wizards decided to interrupt this pause, offering to pile on it all at once. Who was closed, so their death does not mean anything. Therefore, Iron could fight to the full. The monastery wanted to stop them, but it was too late. I had already released the sphere forward. The attackers did not even have time to understand what was happening, how their bodies were through and through the bloody spheres. In the end, the man suggested that he was a clearly supreme master, and Iron looked at Chal Ho. He was a little surprised that he really has enough time to think and only about him when his opponent Yunha. Chal Ho barely managed to figure out what he had in mind as the girl immediately cut off his head. Looking at this picture, the guy decided that he was now his turn, but to his surprise, the girl folded the sword. She was not so stupid as to attack, knowing that she would die without even having time to do anything. And who just recently was in the same team with the guy who had just chopped off his head, and he got rid of them alone, so it is better not to even pretend that they were on one side. The girl suggested that Iron has a goal, so she decided to help, whatever she may be. She hoped that he would spare her, when she suddenly heard the question that if he needed her life. But if it were so, the guy would have nailed her for a long time, having such an incredible power. As soon as Iron called her perspicacious, then a roar rang behind them, and a huge monster came out from behind the forest. The guy remained calm, only turning his head to look at the boss of this place. Anna said she would help, so first she needs to deal with the boss, and then help them get out of here. The girl agreed without hesitation, after which she rushed to the monster, who swung at her with a club. After some time, the portal opened again, and people began to come out of it hastily. Minhan first got out with tears in his eyes, cursing Chal Ho, wanting him to burn in hell. Yunha decided that she released him too easily, but this was enough for the guy. He and his team began to thank her for the salvation of their lives, because they themselves could not do anything. However, it became interesting to them why she hid, that he was a martial artist and went to a detachment of newcomers. The girl pointed to a strict man in a suit, who was supposed to explain everything in more detail. This man immediately offered to get into the car to take them home and tell about everything along the way. The car disappeared from sight. Yunha began to ask Iron how she could help him. However, the guy began to be interested in Response, the heavenly sect or bloody, which made her be nervous. She was supposed to be a member of a demonic cult, but he is not going to report to a combat alliance about it. Suddenly, Yun was frowning, because it was confident that he himself was a member of the cult. Her expression on her face has changed, because if he was not a member of the cult, and they would be along, but this is not so. The girl demanded answers from him, but Iron asked the first, because he began to wait for an answer from her. At the same second, the guy was surrounded by several men in suits, sending blades at him. However, Iron did not even lead an eyebrow, with a calm expression on his face, repeating his question, giving her the last chance. Iron began to gradually lose patience, releasing internal energy outside. The guard around immediately felt incredible pressure, no idea who this monster was. The Keika loudly announced that she was from a bloody sect, while men were surprised at her recognition. The girl asked them to remove their swords because it was her patron, even if he knew about their existence. However, if he wanted, he would have killed them, and without blinking a class, so it is useless to threaten him. When the security laid out the weapon, the Ha-Ha began to dutifully wait for the answer to his question. She decided that he was a follower of the cult, and the guy decided to give an ambiguous but affirmative answer. The girl still did not understand what goal he pursues, since he decided to contact them. She promised to help, so now she only wanted to know what he was eager to be in the know. Iron smiled slightly, deciding that they could go together, after which he headed for her car. When they ended up in the cabin, the girl began to undress and ask for forgiveness, because she needs to breathe. After that, to the surprise of the guy, she pulled off her mask, which was not her real face. Iron was surprised to learn the Infinity Mask, after which he looked at a completely different girl. Yun-Ha thanked him for a compliment about her beauty, after which she also wondered if his face was present. Iron replied that it had changed a bit, but this face and his name are real. She wanted to ask something else, but the guy interrupted her. To sing now was his turn to ask questions. It seemed to him that her comrades actually did not know anything about her, and she gathered the house that I would take them home. The Infinity Mask alone is a whole state, so we can assume that money is not a problem for it. It was outlined from this that she was recruiting followers of the cult, recruiting the next beginners. En-Ha frowned and guiltily lowered her eyes, uncertainly giving an affirmative answer. At first she was going to gain them gradually, establishing connections, but Chal-Ho ruined everything. Rich children clearly bring a bunch of donations, so she was able to earn a lot of money. They collect donations, but not an absurd quantity as they require association, because they need a guild. Joining the cult goes inextricably with the help of the guild, so it turns out very profitable. For players who cannot increase the level without progress, guilds are the most excellent place. Ihun decided that now her turn, and dared to ask what kind of equipment he used at the portal. It was pretty persistently on her part, but she revealed the secrets of the cult, so she wants to get something equal. Iron admitted that he could not use his martial art yet, then dumbfounded the girl. He blew his head to the supreme master of martial arts, and now he declares this, hiding behind basic equipment. Now there was a turn of Irona asks what the cult has forgotten in the black market, referring to the order. They use the black market to gain sect followers, and also learn to kill and steal. Yun-Ha asked not to interfere with their cult in such dirty deeds, because they pursue only bad players in crime. Their goal is a set of noble followers who have never entered the dark path. They are not as bad as the teacher described, and the guild Shasan described are simply typical Sreeds. After that, the girl decided to ask the last question, first deciding to call him the patron, but stopped at the killer. As soon as the guy heard such an appeal, he immediately released a huge amount of energy. En-Ha could not move, and even raise a finger, feeling anger emanating from the guy. She had the feeling that it was him, and now this creature literally gave rise to fear inside her. When Iron calmed down, Yun-Ha realized that it did not breathe all this time, after which he began to grab the air with his mouth. She realized that this was a warning, while the guy noticed that they had already arrived. They were near the company of Ganha, which has influence throughout Asia, and at the head, Director Kan Chol S rank. Iron could not even assume that the building of the company Ganha is actually the headquarters of the cult. He was interested in whether she would let him go if he did not go, but Yun-Ha was sure of his interest. But if he refuses, she will not lag behind him. Then the guild Slassen and the bloody cult will be chased. Hearing such a statement, the girl was in shock, realizing that this man was really Iron. The guy suggested that if it is expressed, the persecution will immediately stop. However, it is better not to joke here, because she also risks bringing him with her. Suddenly, they heard a formidable voice behind them, and turning around, they saw a man who fled to Iron. It was the same director, Kan Chol, who was dissatisfied with the fact that he dared to threaten the lady. The man threatened him to prepare for the consequences, while Yun-Ha asked him to stop, but everyone knew that it was too late. But Iron easily stopped the old man's blow, putting his hand in front of him. After a while, Kan Chol was sitting at the table set and smiled joyfully, ate guilt in front of the guy. He announced with a smile that they could eat plenty and not deny themselves anything. Iron carefully examined the food in front of him, and he was immediately asked to be calm, because there is no poison. The guy began a meal because I still won't work against him. He just did not eat normally for a long time. After a hasty investigation carried out after the rumors that he was going here, Kan Chol learned something about him. Is this Iron, the killer of his own comrades who recently fell into slavery to the Volcano Guild, although it is outwardly different from the description? Also, the man felt something entertaining when he so easily blocked his blow. First of all, he felt internal energy, and not the power of the player, which also differs from what he heard. His internal energy is not much higher than his, but now for some reason he is too calm. Having decided to dispel the pause, Kan Chol said that he had come because the lady said that he had a long time. He decided to give Iron everything that he would not wish. But at first he must promise something. Wiping his mouth, the guy immediately guessed that they wanted him to enter the ranks of the followers of the sect. As far as they know, he knows quite a bit about their cult, and the man wanted to know where such knowledge comes from. After all, the man never heard that the killer of Lee Iron was once a member of the cult. When the guy realized that inquiries were made about him, he immediately began to burst anger. However, the man did not dare to let someone into the headquarters, not having first taken sufficient information. Then he suggested that the guy joined the cult when he was in the zone of the guild of the volcano. He also asked about the heavenly and bloody sect, although he never said on whose side he himself. Iron decided not to hide, and replied that now he was on the side of the bloody sect. This was enough for the old man, and he was already ready to accept him, but Iron was not going to obey them. The wolf has nothing to obey some dog, so he demanded that they obey him. Now anger began to remove the man, who was surprised by the arrogant words of the guest. However, Iron continued to stand on his own, announced that he would have to transfer the position of a bloody demon. These words were enough for Conchal to break off, and destroyed the table with one blow. The guy crossed the line, and now the director did not interfere with simply destroying this insolent. The worried Yun-hun wanted to stop her grandfather, but the old man ordered her not to intervene. Anyone was well aware of what happens if you argue with a bloody demon, and even a girl would not save him. Objectively speaking, now Iron is a level below Conchal. It is moving quickly, but there is too little time. And his body is not yet able to endure martial arts, which slightly limited him. The man decided that his opponent needed a weapon that he was ready to provide. However, the guy could not use the weapon, otherwise everything would result in a huge disaster. The director more and more believed that this guy was just an upstart who would not even try to fight him. Iron continued to provoke him, saying that if he uses martial arts, it would not seem enough. The man knew very well that he simply was mocking him, but he was not able to restrain his anger. As a concern for kindness in relation to the lady, he gave him 3 spare seconds to attack. It was difficult for Iron to believe that the Grave Sect was really so noble. The old man recalled that he is treated as a guest and not as an enemy, so they give him such concessions. Yun-han again tried to stop Conchal, but unsuccessfully, and had to go aside. Then she turned to Iron, asking the honorary guest to say that she was just who was blabbed. The man was dissatisfied with the fact that the girl so fierce stands up for the one whom he practically does not know. The guy thought in the same way, because even she herself is unlikely to understand why he was doing this. This is too much, let him save her life, but it is already too much, so he will not fulfill her request. Although, deep down, she understands who exactly will save all who in difficult times, which caused him a smile. After all, in fact, the Yun-ha is a priestess, dutifully serving the bloody demon, the head of the sect. Having lost the remnants of self-control, Conchal rushed at him on the attack, insulting along the way. Yun-ha managed to scream loudly, after which there was a deafening explosion on the upper floors of the building. Suddenly the girl was surprised to notice that the flame of her grandfather gradually disappears, which had never happened before. Looking at the guy, she realized that it did not disappear, but was stolen by their guest. Control was taken over his forces, and this is clearly a martial art, because Iron now flared up a flame. When they recognized the technique of a bloody demon, the guy ordered them to fall to their knees with an imperious voice. Conchal and Yun-hu immediately fell in front of him, loudly greeting the bloody demon. Looking at them from top to bottom, Iron added that now he is their master, none other than a bloody demon. Looking at the floor, the director could not understand how the player knows the art of a bloody demon. However, the guy was only interested in whether they were ready to convey to him the title of Blood Demon. After a long silence, Conchal explained that the current bloody demon was already seasoning with a sect. Then the question arose why they knelt before him, if there is already a bloody demon. Everything was because his art of a bloody demon seemed stronger than that of the current demon. He did not know how the guy mastered such art, but this is a symbol of the bloody sect, the true sign of the bloody demon. Iron was amused by the words about the true sign, which caused him laughter, and what the director was surprised. Now it became clear to him why the sect was in this state, and it was also necessary to do something with this. The old man was dumbfounded, hearing that now they were being refueling an unfinished bloody demon. After these words, the spikes created from the shadows, which stopped in front of his face, headed towards. Under the threat of death, the guy began to ask what position he occupies in the sect now. Conchal was a left guard, which means that he should be well known. The symbol is not the art of a bloody demon, which deprives the current chapter of all its privileges. Now only Iron had the real divine art of a bloody demon. The man immediately felt that the energy of divine art was undeniable proof. He and Yun-hong bowed to him again, wishing the eternal prosperity to the true demon. Iron was surprised because I did not know that it was a greeting, designed to honor the bloody demon. The guy asked to stop because it looks ridiculous, asking to tell how things are in the sect now. Now it was necessary to tell everything that could be useful when he expelled this impostor. Now there are only 6 foremen in the sect, and there is also the right guard and the left, control. But the current foreman will not be so simply accepted by a new bloody demon, because about 10 years have passed since the coming of the current one. Some members of the sect are very useful, for example, looking for information and deals with external issues. The rest can also be extremely useful, and by order he can find out from the elders about their intentions. Iron, without hesitation, agreed, which greatly delighted the director, who was ready to fulfill the first order. Yun-ha was surprised to watch the grandfather headed for the exit, leaving her alone with the guy. When they crossed their eyes, the girl again gave him a greeting that Iron did not really like it. Since then, this place has become the chambers of the bloody demon in the Nimyanku, where there were a bunch of guards. Yihan decided to go to his chambers where Iron was meditating, but immediately distracted the guest. This time she had a bloody red dress with a burgundy cloak, which emphasized her pale. The guy first decided that something happened, but the girl just came to greet him in the morning. He did not particularly believe that she was so dispersed only in order to just say hello. However, everything was so, because of which Iron asked her to stop doing this from tomorrow. There was no sense in this, but Yun-ha said that she was a priestess serving as a demon. The guy invited her to sleep longer, but the priestess should go to sleep later and get up before a bloody demon. But at that very moment she was very surprised. Somehow she heard that Iron was not sleeping at all, taking it as a joke. However, he was very serious and asked to rest, ending with this morning greetings. The girl thought that she should not sleep either, but the master quickly reassured her attempts. He ordered her to no longer follow stupid formalities and behave the same as in the portal. Such a statement made her nervous, because of which she did not know what to answer and how to behave. She suddenly realized that the bloody demon used to be a player who could behave informally. The girl tried to convince him that this was not the case, but he asked to stop talking to such a tier. Yun-ha still turned to him as a master, but the guy who demanded the opposite from her did not like it. Instead, he decided to find out if there were any news from the guard. However, at the moment there was nothing that would be interested in the guy in full. At that very moment, Iron rose from his seat, saying that his goal was the same that was surprised by Yun-ha. Now he was only worried about how to get rid of the impostor who proclaimed himself a bloody demon. The strongest wins in this world, and as soon as he shows that he is stronger, everything will become in place. So he needs to train, so he asked the girl to take him to the hall if he is here. Previously, he was interested in teachers when they teach him the combat equipment that he needs. The techniques that are being studied now are adapted in such a way as to fully use the strength of all 3 teachers. Simply put, each technique is a separate gear. Together, they are perfectly combined with each other. If you do not follow a certain order, do not go to the next level, because you can force the mechanism to break. So until it is ended with the divine art of a bloody demon, he will not be able to use martial arts or weapons. It is better to live on himself in order to understand these principles. So the king of the sword invited him to try at least once. As soon as the guy took the weapon and began to swing them, his body suddenly pierced terrible pain. Now Iron doesn't even want to represent it, deciding to better go through the top 10 reform cycles. Thanks to the blood of the black demon, he almost reached the limit, but still did not reach the full development. So far, the dragon's blood still circulates inside, which slightly increases its skills. However, now the guy must get rid of the poison and absorb only vitality. A week later, Yun was sitting in front of Iron's room, trying to understand what he was doing. He cannot train the art of a bloody demon in such a post and even so long. At that very moment, the door opened, and a half-naked guy came out of the room, whose body was noticeably strengthened. Finally, he managed to achieve the last step of the divine art of the bloody demon. Iron immediately set to go for food, because he had not eaten for a week, while the Yuan-Ka from the side was watching him. He invited her to join, but the girl did not answer, noting that in a week he had become even stronger. Without pure blood, a special ritual cannot be practiced by the art of a bloody demon, but he was able to achieve it. The guy again asked the question of what pulled her out of his thoughts, forcing her to start. The Haha decided to cook more next time, but Iron did not ask about that. In addition, he is not going to beware of those who are weaker than him, so the guys who follow him can also eat with him. The girl was dumbfounded that he noticed a detachment of the Black Shadow that were professionally disguised. These are elite guards, personally untrained by the foreman, who were masters of their craft. By secrecy, they are equal to the famous ghostly murders of Murim, but he was able to notice them. Meanwhile, Iron waved to one of them, urging them to go faster and sit down at the table. A little later, he began to meditate again and began to feel real blood. The guy almost completely absorbed the blood of the black dragon, making it part of himself. Now he needs to clean it, improving to true blood circulating inside him. The only thing that is missing is the time to reduce it. It first needs to take control of the bloody sect. When he went out into the kitchen, he noticed Yun-ha, who was engaged in cooking, and announced that the food was ready. The guy looked suspiciously at food, because he said that he himself would figure out food. But the girl was different. Pointing to the plate, he decided that the spices were a lot, and such a comment was forced to startle. She thought that it would be tastier, after which she fell to her knees, apologizing for the terrible sin. Suddenly, Iron looked out the window, after which he told the girl that guests granted them. Meanwhile, at the very entrance, the guards grabbed the weapon, saying an uninvited guest that he would not pass. The third foreman, the cold-blooded Taoist Master Khan Bak, was dissatisfied with such a technique. The guard immediately recognized him, but continued to be in suspense, executing the order. The old man was surprised that they recognized him, and nevertheless they refused to miss, which had not happened before. However, this is the order of the left guard. No one can enter without permission, even the foreman. Dissatisfied with such a development of events before the BEC waved his sword, sending ice spikes towards the guard. He knew that this was not their fault, but decided to warn them for the last time and go forward. Now they only needed to move back, and he would close his eyes to their rudeness and disrespect. Men in costumes knew that he was not an opponent, but they had a clear order not to let anyone in. Having rushed forward, the old man waved his sword, thinking that he had to behave a follower of the bloody sect. The guard did not have time to react to his attack. A girl who stopped him immediately stood in front of the foreman. Before Bak, he barely managed to stop the sword, not understanding why Milady acts so recklessly, rushing under him. Manhwa was unhappy with his actions because the left guard did not allow anyone to enter. The old man was surprised that these really do not understand what the left guard actually conceived. This is a betrayal. He wants to divide the bloody sect which they united with such difficulty. However, the girl was sure that the bloody demon was chosen by her, a priestess, but he still doubts. Before Bak, it was interesting whether she could explain how the former player suddenly mastered the art of a bloody demon. The impostors who pretend to be bloody demons always appear, and he may not be an exception. Perhaps this guy is a spy from the heavenly clan who managed to fool them. If he all his life is a bloody demon, the law does not allow the presence of two lords at once, which will result in battle. At such a pace, her and his and the left guard are convicted of treason and will be lucky if they do not kill. Therefore, the foreman decided to deal with this in advance, so as not to bring to himself and other troubles. The old man asked the girl to move away because he did not want to lose either her or the left guard. They will never be forgiven for this, so they should be faithful to the current bloody demon. Before Bak, everything is already decided. If you have to quarrel with the left guard, or even lose his life, he is ready to go for it. For the sake of his neighbors, he will do everything in his power, so he can no longer endure it, even for her. When he waved his sword, Khan Chol behind him asked for forgiveness for rudeness, after which he attacked. Before Bak, he barely managed to defend himself with a sword, but now he was completely sure that he would have to fight against his own. However, the angry director tried to restrain his anger and was interested in that he was doing. Khan Chol expected such an outcome, but surprisingly, everything began to turn around too quickly. Before Bak announced that the guild's Skasan had already begun to act, which dumbfounded the director and the Manhwa. They stumbled upon their trail, so now they least need the disagreement inside the sect. If you talk about a bloody demon now, then one heaven knows what will happen. Khan Chol was the first to throw the enemies as a bait, but Shan had no reason to resist the bloody demon. The foreman suggested that they did not even think that a guy could be a spy. Such a statement only angered the director more, who was sure that it was all nonsense. Before Bak decided that he was not able to recognize the true art of a bloody demon. He also knows perfectly well that the heavenly cult studied this art for years, and he still managed to achieve this level. However, before the backing stood on the fact that even if he was a real demon, it did not change anything. It was obvious that the guy was seeking the split of the bloody sect, and this is only to him alone. The only true step is to kill him, but Khan Chol was unhappy that he finally crossed the line. The foreman could not stand aside when his comrade voluntarily climbs on Rojan, supporting the wrong one. The next second, they were ready to attack each other to prove their case. When they practically reached each other, the imperious voice of nearby ordered them to stop. At that very moment, Iron was sharply behind the back of Bak, which was dumbfounded by his appearance. Seeing the bloody demon, Khan Chol immediately fell to his knees, starting to dutifully greet the master. Looking at the guy, the foreman was surprised that he could not even feel his presence. Meanwhile, the director ordered a formidable tone to Bak to immediately bow his head to the master. If he fell into the neck, it would be the end, but their fight managed to end before the beginning. But now the old man carefully examined a guy with scarlet hair and red eyes. This was an undeniable proof of the art of a bloody demon and this strange power. Suddenly, to Bak, he changed his mind, folding his sword in the scabbard, after which he greeted the bloody demon. Iron was unhappy asked to stop these bow, because they managed to get tired of him very much. The blood sect is already being destroyed, and they still decided and to reaches the limbs to each other. Then the guy suggested that the elder came here to kill him if the guy did not live up to his expectations. Such words made the old man get excited, but he gathered his courage and gave an affirmative answer. And now the sect is already serving a bloody demon, and the appearance of a new master will entail a split. Things in the sect were just getting better, but this old man turned out to be bolder than the rest. That is the most for the elder. Iron smiled ambiguously. I am interested in whether he is suitable for the standards of the old man. Before back, evidence was needed, after which the guy released a drop of blood from his finger, deciding that this would be enough. The man in shock noticed that so much demonic energy spilled from such a small drop of blood. Without thinking twice, the old man fell to his knees, loudly welcomed the great bloody demon. He decided that he would have to chop off his right hand for daring to doubt the master. Beck waved his sword to cut off his brush, but some power immediately threw the sword to the side. Iron did not say anything not to cut off, but he was unhappy that no one was listening to him. Sometime later, being inside the building, Yun-ha, Tabak, and Kan-chol sat on their knees in front of the guy. He asked them to sit on the sofa, but they could not afford to sit next to the great master. Looking at Iron, the director visited the vague feeling that in just a week he had become even stronger. Having relocated himself, the man decided to ask if the bloody demon reached a transcendental step. He has not yet reached such a level, and however, with such rapid progress, he will soon succeed. However, the current bloody demons have already reached this step, which makes it a dangerous opponent. Moreover, the first foreman, the closest advisor to the current master, is also at this step. And among the remaining foremen, nobody left me who would be ready to switch to the new demon. Suddenly, Ihun said that there was only one way out, since the master is developing faster than expected. He must quickly reach a transcendental step and personally defeat the current bloody demon. In this case, even the elders will have no choice but to go to his side. However, Iron did not know how much time would be needed to reach this step, and was not sure that he could get to her at all. It is unlikely that they will just sit aside and watch while the guy will train carefree. Now everyone already knows about him in Sects, and therefore they hasten to attack him while he is not enough. Suddenly, Kan-chol began to beat his forehead against the floor, asking loudly forgiveness from the master. He thought the fourth elder would be ready to go to the other side, but he had already oathed to the current master. Iron asked him to stop lamenting such trifles, after which an idea was born in his head. He decided not to pull, and as soon as possible to overthrow the current bloody demon. If you enter the portal, you will fall into unknown land, full of various dangerous monsters. But if you enter the dungeon, you can get into a completely different world, different from the present. For the first time, the world learned about the existence of dungeons when monsters began to pour through the fault everywhere. Humanity was saved by them, the inhabitants of another world who studied martial arts. Although later super players began to appear among the inhabitants of the earth, who themselves began to repulse monsters. But they could not compare with the inhabitants of the captured worlds that fought with mysterious creatures for centuries. These forces divided the world into spheres of influence so that everyone could control their territory. Muram, who came from the territory of South Korea, was convinced that the bloody sect thoroughly disappeared from prying eyes. However, Iron and his subordinates were able to get to the entrance to the sect, standing in front of huge doors. This structure did not fit into the existing landscape, and the door looked very strange. Ihun thought that the door on the way to the bloody demon should stand out, but did not even try to hide it at least a little. Well, if someone got to here, then he overcame all the traps and magic barriers, and there is nothing more to hide. She can confidently say that Iron is the only one who managed to go so far. The girl decided that he was for the first time in the world of Muram, but the guy was already here once, which surprised her. Suddenly, she began to fall asleep with compliments, saying that he was an excellent player. But Iron was sure that if he lived, as always, he would never have gotten a long time. The rest did not understand the meaning of his words, but the guy asked them to forget about it and open the doors. And Hooser went to the door and began to concentrate her energy, because without this, it will not work to open it. At that very moment, a bright light began to come out from the inside, while the girl invited the master inside. Iron was sincerely surprised, because I heard that things were going well here, but I did not think that everything was so bad. Kan-chol apologized to him, but the guy was interested to know what the fortress brought to such a state. Few people know, but Muram is part of the destroyed world, and this world must be constantly supported. For example, the magical stones of monsters, because the fortress of the Bloody King is quite large. Even in comparison with other parts of the world, Muram, this fortress absorbs quite a lot of energy. Looking at this picture, it was clear why the sect was so desperately looking for followers. But the guild is part of a huge corporation, so you could just pick up more magic stones. Kan-chol explained that you should not attract too much attention with such actions. If the guild Shasan found out about the current state of the fortress, then the outcome would be known only to heaven. This is one of the reasons. But the foreman also banned the hunt for monsters in portals. They said that this would contradict the laws if the followers of the bloody demon will hunt for ordinary monsters. After listening to rather ridiculous explanations, Iron concluded that they would have to work hard. Before Back was also always against this, and even founded the guild to continue to follow their plan. At that very moment, several people approached them who had long been waiting for their appearance. Yun-ha immediately recognized the bloody swordsman from the detachment of the Bloodlord. The captain of the Black Swordsmen, Jing Jin-su, was ordered to escort them, so he asked to follow them. The girl considered it suspicious, because of which she pulled out the sword, decided that they were about to lead them to force. Looking at the blade with indifference, the man replied that they only follow the orders of the master. However, in addition to the ha-ha, before Back and Conchal also prepared to fight, not wanting to go of their own free will. Captain Mechnikov did not come to fight, but in this situation nothing can be done. Suddenly, Iron decided to follow them, because they made such a way to escort him so he would go. The guy asked his subordinates not to be afraid and just follow them. Sometime later, they ended up inside the spacious room, noticing a man on the throne. Looking at the current bloody demon, we can clearly say that he is much stronger than before. The man who stood on the right side of the master could not believe. The left guard opposed the bloody lord. When asked how he could do this, Conchal replied that he saw a true bloody demon. All those present in the throne room began to show their indignation, hearing such speeches. Suddenly a man sitting on the throne, who was surprised that there was another bloody demo except him, gave his voice. While the rest were surprised, the man announced that he had brought the art of a bloody demon to perfection. The absorption of the power of this guy will allow him to rise to the bloody god and gain incredible power. His subordinates immediately began to support the master's plan, dutifully praising him. But at the same second, they were interrupted by the voice of Iron, who was sure that it was complete nonsense. An indifferent look, the guy asked him to stop saying stupid things and go down to him. Right now, Iron wanted to show how much the current ruler is actually miserable. The subordinates again began to resent, looking at how their master gradually lost patience. One of them asked the bloody demon not to intervene, deciding to deal with him on his own. Others were also according to, because no one would come close to the master, not going through them first. As soon as the demon gave the go, ahead, the rest immediately surrounded the guests who were already ready to battle. Conchal was surprised that the elders decided to unite. Only the first elder was not going to intervene. He was a fighting master to the brain of bones and always hated to attack a crowd. This gives a little relief. But the difference between them is still too obvious. It would be ideal to get rid of the elders one at a time. The director again began to wonder why Iron generally went here of his own free will. The guy saw the Yun-ha trembling, so he reassured her, saying that she would not die, but she thought that Iron is immortal. This was not so, but he certainly will not lose these guys, because if he died, then the whole world will fall. But while he did not find his teachers, he is not going to destroy the world. With these words, he surprised the girl. She did not understand what he was talking about, and the guy was thinking about this for 100 years, thinking what would do when he returned. Of course, revenge came to my mind, but he must also thank his teachers. Iron decided to find everything that his teachers left, and restore so that no one else dares to touch it. Move-An promised to give him strength, which caused a smile on the guy's face, who thought about them as a bunch of scammers. They just wanted him to create something valuable without destroying the world out of a sense of revenge. Iron understands their intention, and is ready to follow him, and therefore ordered him to attack him right now. At that very moment, one of the foremen released the poison of ghostly blood in their direction, creating a cloud of fog. The worried Conchal began to call the master to retreat, heading in his direction, but to Back returned him back. Then he looked towards Iron, but he was in the middle of the cloud, so the old man had no choice. He decided to cover the master, waved his sword, creating an ice wall that was supposed to dispel the poison. The subordinate demon thought that I was so strong ghostly blood that even his bloody demon shuns him. Death for this guy was inevitable, so he decided to leave a good impression of himself, hoping for the position of left guard. Having fallen to his knees, Conchal in shock could not believe that right now everything would be so easy. Suddenly, Yun-Hyu came up to him. "We will inform you that the bloody demon is in order." But he did not understand, and how the lady knew about it. Ghostly blood is deadly even for those who have reached the last step, and their master is significantly lagging behind these guys. However, she slightly tells her to follow him, and now she was sure that he did not die. Their bloody demon was supposed to save the bloody cult, and now Iron stood as if nothing had happened. The guy was not surprised that the cult is on the verge of falling, because they do not stick out inside the fortress, do not pay attention to the world. Outside, people like them are full, and these people do not even imagine which masters are now pacing outside. At best, they are comparable to a large guild, but they do not reach those who are dangerous. After all, they ignored the left guard and priestess when they tried to tell about what was happening outside. One of the foremen ordered not to listen to him, offering to pile up to everyone at once in order to get rid of him. Even when the fists and blades headed towards the guy, he did not budge, looking at them with a boring look. He wanted to tell the soldiers why it was the bloody demon who was revered, like God. At the same moment, hands and weapons stopped in front of Iron because he is all for a cult. The guy was glad to see that at least bloody techniques were transferred in all these years. None of the warriors could move while Iron asked the left guard from which of them to spare. Unable to move away from the shock, the man began to list people who should save lives. As soon as Control finished, the guy clicked his fingers, killing the rest of the warriors. If they have mastered bloody techniques, then they certainly not hide from the divine art of the bloody demon. He was wondering why the head of a false bloody demon was still on his shoulders. Turning his head to the man sitting on the throne, Iron was sure that he was not real. At that very moment, the old man rose from his seat, being angry on the table of a brazen guy. Suddenly, he began to create a bloody sphere, from which he pulled a huge sword created from blood. It was the art of a sword of a bloody demon, which converted a weapon into a dragon. Directing the dragon towards Iron, the man wanted to tear him to pieces and leave only the scarlet lake of blood. But even when the guy was absorbed, he was able to insult a false bloody demon. With a light movement of his hand, he got out of his mouth of the dragon, remaining intact and unharmed. His teacher never mixed the divine art of a bloody demon with any art of a sword. The old man seemed nonsense because his teacher was to be the founder of the Sect, who died thousands of years ago. Iron suggested that he repeated this to some fools and conveyed further under the guise of true art. Such a statement was angry with a man who ordered him to stop saying stupid things. The guy blocked his sword of a bloody demon alone with his palm, and even now he was calm. When the old man noticed an elongated hand, he recognized the flying blade, after which he decided to break the distance. Having lowered his head, he noticed on himself the needles from the energy of the bloody demon, which could not be. No matter how magnificent the divine art of the bloody demon is only a combat technique. But these needles suck blood and destroy its inner power right now. Having concentrated his energy, the man tried to get rid of the needles, asking him not to laugh. He was sure that these were only tricks and manipulations, because he had never heard of such a skill. Raising a bloody sword over him again, the old man said that he was the true bloody demon. After that, he used the sixth form of art of the sword, releasing the rage of a bloody dragon. At that very moment, Iron began to create a bloody sphere in his palms, deciding to have fun according to his rules. While the enemy dragon was approaching him, the guy created his own, which was several times less. When the old man saw his creation, he laughed loudly, deciding that he was all capable of. At this time, two dragons were heading for a meeting to each other in order to collide in an unequal battle. When a huge dragon absorbed the small, there was an explosion that blinded all those present. But then the veil of dust dispelled, and everyone found a bloody demon standing on the knees in front of Iron. Bleeding, the old man clearly felt something when their energy collided. This guy clearly reached the extreme level of the kingdom of the demon, although the man was sure that his level is higher. Iron realized that he was the youngest in the cult, came out of nowhere with divine art, and suddenly took the throne. It was very difficult to believe that people really elevated him to the leader of the cult without finding out the details. But he did not even master the bloody art, after which he suggested that the old man is on the side of the heavenly sect. Hearing only silence in response, the guy decided that he was right, because of which he had many questions. He did not dare to immediately kill him, because he needs a man alive until he gets information from him. These words angered the old man, who immediately began to change externally, becoming similar to the demon. He began to produce a huge amount of energy while Iron looked at him with indifference. At this time, subordinate guys were dumbfounded, because they decided that this was impossible, and his appearance belongs to the bloody god. However, Iron knew that this was a reverse flow of blood, a desperate last struggle. The old man smiled madly, wanting to absorb the bloody god to whom everyone would worship. This was not a drop did not frighten Iron, who invited him to try to do this if he could. The man planned to suppress him with stronger internal energy, which was too expected. The old man asked him not to be such an upstart, because his level of internal energy is much higher. For more than 20 years he was calculated as a bloody demon that absorbs the blood of tens of thousands of people. He did not know how the guy reflected all his blows, but under the pressure of internal energy, he certainly would not stand. The demon was sure that the victory was behind him, because he did not feel any danger from Iron. However, the guy was sure that he would easily survive the pressure of his inner energy, which dumbfounded the old man. In a normal battle, the energy level is crucial, since the enemy must be suppressed with absolute power. But the technique of absorption of a bloody demon does not depend on energy in any way. It absorbs and does not burn. The main thing is to properly manage energy, and now Iron is about to show him how to. At the same moment, the guy used the technique of absorption of a bloody demon, and a wild pain pierced the man. The rest in shock watched how a self-proclaimed bloody demon leave the last forces. Returning to human form, he found himself in some other space. While he was trying to realize where he was, he suddenly noticed a clot of energy in front of him while iron was behind him. At that very moment, a trembling pierced the man, and when he came to his senses, he realized that this guy is a great bloody god. When the old man lost consciousness, Iron looked at his hand, feeling the absorbed blood complete impurity. It is necessary to clean from everything that is not necessary, and leave everything useful, then collect energy in Danton. When the mechanism earned, the guy felt that he reaches the top of pure blood. Such is the art of a bloody demon. Looking at what happened, Conchal realized that it was only a game, and the bloody cult needed changes. Even if the bloody god still appeared in the cult earlier, they would still not have the future. Therefore they crossed to the other side. I understand that the defeat is inevitable. They hoped that their victims would arouse the cult. But Subak was the first to know, and brought to perfection the divine art of a bloody demon. And even he suffered a crushing defeat, although he assured everyone that was a true bloody demon. Moreover, in the last seconds he, with tears in his eyes, nevertheless recognized the bloody god in the face of iron. At that very moment, Conchal turned to the priestess, wondering if she had foreseen such an outcome. Pointing to the guy, she said that the bloody demon is the king of the bloody cult. This god is capable of a miracle. All that she did simply recognize the true bloody demon who will lead their cult ahead. Meanwhile, the first elder came out to the guy, and Conchal could not believe that he still could not accept the truth. But contrary to his expectations, the man spread his hands, wishing the bloody demon of eternal rule. After that, he sharply fell to his knees, bowing his head in front of Iron as a sign of respect. The remaining members of the sect followed his example, honorably welcoming the new master. The guy compared them with him, located on the ruins of life, because once he was in their place. These people also lost everything and dreamed of revenge, barely survived, waiting for the appearance of a new bloody demon. As a student of his masters, he must answer their call and therefore cannot turn away from them now. At that very moment, blood began to ooze from his body, creating special patterns throughout the body. Conchal immediately recognized the Bloodlord, whom they had been waiting for so long. It was the god of a bloody cult. This guy was a true demon who initially had to be the leader of their sect. Looking at what was happening, all subordinates began to praise the rule of the bloody demon even more. Looking at the people worshipping him, he ordered everyone to rise, because he does not like something like that, so they may not do that anymore. However, the doctrine says that when the true bloody side arrives, they must bow to him. Yunha explained that the doctrine is the instruction left by the bloody king to the followers of the cult. If it was a set of rules, it turns out that Iron himself can determine how his subordinates should behave. Suddenly, to back, he noticed that the old man lying on the floor was alive, because he sharply grabbed the sword. Iron hastily stopped him, asking him to forget about him, because he still has no chance. He was finally broken because he could not oppose him, being in this state. The guy was about to engage in a heavenly clan, which led his new subordinates into a stupor. Instead of explaining, he decided to show, after which he hit several points on the old man's body. To the general surprise, his body here has already begun to change thanks to the technique of reverse transformation. Before Back was shocked that no one had noticed this technique before, and even the former leader of the cult suspected anything. However, Iron previously said that this man is from a heavenly clan, although no one believed him. This is a martial art that allows you to secretly change the body of your own free will. It was the technique of a heavenly demon, but he decided to discuss this later, alone with Concholi. After that, the guy turned to the priestess, wondering whether or here is a pond of 10,000 blood. Without extra words, the girl decided to personally accompany the master to the appointed place. It is full of energy. The whole body is cleansed. For one who is not from a bloody cult, the flow of energy would seem too heavy. After a couple of minutes, they were in place. This is a pond of 10,000 blood, where the blood of all occultists was collected. It is here that the leader of the cult sheds his blood in order to conduct a blessing ceremony. Yunha suggested preparing ceremonial clothes, but Iron did not come here for these formalities. Instead, he decided to start asking her who, in her opinion, is a real god. It suggested that the demon, standing right in front of her, was the true god, but he asked not to hear such an answer. And he is interested in the classic idea of God, and he wanted to hear her personal definition of God. This is a supermyth that fulfills human desires and leads them to welfare. Then the guy asked why he was called God, even though he tapped the foreman of his ass. However, such a punishment does not make him God, although control over the bloody art may already be enough. The girl did not understand the whole truth because no one showed her this yet, but now everything will change. Iron asked her to watch carefully, because now he would show her why he is God, after which he created a drop of his blood. When she plunged into the pond, everything began to tremble, and this was felt by all subordinates who were above. At that moment, the guy felt the energy of all the followers of the cult in the fortress. Suddenly, in the middle of the pond, a tornado appeared, whose strength was striking in the imagination. Manhwa could not believe that the pond of 10,000 blood on such is capable, because she did not even read about this. At the time of Teacher Muvan, this was not possible, but now completely different times have come. The divine art of the bloody demon to whom he learned is somewhat different from the usual method. Caro and Demon said that divine art resembles the magic of the destroyed race of Gina. But this art created Muvan, so he should overcome the tricks of some kind of disappeared race. When the king of demons began to work on a rethinking of divine art, he helped him a little. To check the power of new divine art, they need power, and the technique has a new feature. The divine art of the bloody demon combines magic and military techniques and acts as a spell. If the god of power to punish, he must bestow a blessing, otherwise this is not God. At that very moment, tornado began brighter, which is why Yun had to cover his face so as not to be blinded. Suddenly, the tornado scattered, and bloody rain poured throughout the room, sprinkling the girl. She could not understand what was happening, when suddenly her body ceased to obey her, and the girl fell to her knees. Yunha felt something suddenly walked all over her body, but Iron asked her not to worry. When it begins, it will feel completely different, but now the girl just lost consciousness, falling to the floor. However, in addition to her, all the followers of the cult, who were even at a great distance, lost consciousness. Sometime later, sitting on the throne, Iron noticed 3 subordinates who were beside himself with happiness. At that very moment, they fell to their knees, thanking a bloody demon for immense mercy. He said to stop doing this, but he could not help but notice that everyone became younger and stronger after using the pond. They even blushed their eyes, symbolizing the divine art of a bloody demon. Suddenly, the guy ordered the 3rd foreman to cut his finger and show his blood. He agreed without hesitation. Iron explained that this is called purple blood, but they hardly knew what it was. Before the back, he lost consciousness, came to his senses, and now he can use twice as much internal energy. It all depends on the level that was in them before, and now their skills have been reinforced by about 2 times. Incredibly, the left guard and the 1st foreman is already at the level of purple blood, which is not surprising. However, the priestess is now at the next step, black blood, which she was dumbfounded. Enha did not understand why she was, because the foreman had much more achievements. Perhaps the fact is that she was a priestess. Iron now affects its strength, and therefore it can say with confidence that it is at a level higher. The new ability of the divine art of the blood demon went into business. From now on, those who study bloody art and join the cult will receive power, but will become its debtors. He would like to see how the occultists are doing outside, and fortunately there was a place with a good look. The guy noticed that even the most starving and sick residents became more lively. However, he knew that this would not last long, since people could not live only at the expense of internal energy. They still do not have enough money that would be worth spending on providing their people. Khan Chol bowed his head and apologized, deciding that this was all because of the guards and foremen. But in fact, the left guard was not to blame. This is all Huel Subak and the dead foreman. They will pay dearly because they ruined the mine. They will not even be able to find peace after death. Nevertheless, it was possible to prevent everything from falling apart, and now they needed to somehow hold out until the next month. Khan Chol said that they even sold the share of the company, but the guild is still on the verge of decay. They were going to clean up a couple of portals, but then a gentleman appeared, who turned everything upside down. Looking at the sky doomedly, the guy mentally turned to the teachers, asking why they sent him to these people. The most important problem is the lack of foreman. The first senior but was responsible for the Palace of the Sword, the second for the Gold Palace. Each palace occupied a certain role, and at the head there was a leader, refueling all this. But now all the foremen are dead, so there was no one to fulfill. But Iron suggested raising deputies. They studied at the foreman so they would cope, although they were faithful to their foreman. Anyone who refused to swear in fidelity to the bloody demon, according to Khan Chol, should be executed. He wanted to prevent the rebellion in advance. But why get rid of people when workers are so few? It is unlikely that they would dare to go against Iron. Therefore, the guy ordered the way he said. The man folded his hands in a respectful gesture, agreeing with the order of the master. Suddenly, the guy said that Khan Chol would become the leader of the cult. The director was dumbfounded from this news. The leader of the cult is not a bloody demon, just no one was yet able to take such a responsibility. It is necessary to separate the role of God from the leader. Let the corporation fall apart. She still had no future. He supported the company afloat for several decades, also took care of the bloody cult. However, this is precisely what makes him a good leader, because he understands what is happening both outside and inside the fortress. The rest also heard that Iron wanted to appoint Khan Chol the leader of the cult, with which they agreed. Therefore, the guy announced that the left guard will now be the leader of the bloody cult. Having knelt down, the man promised that he would prove that he was worthy to bear such responsibility. He already sounds like a real leader, and says exactly what the master wants to hear. After that, the guy began to ask what a plan he had, since the king's fortress does not have a source of income. Then he turned to the others, asking if they had worthy ideas, because of which they started. Suddenly the Haha asked to leave it on her, although she knows the fortress not as good as her grandfather. But she best understands what is happening outside her walls, because she helped with corporation management. The girl asked her to give her a week to solve all the problems regarding a huge crisis. Iron knew that she controlled a large guild, therefore she could be able to cope with this work. The guy handed her all the rights, after which he sent to act, wanting to get a quick result. A week later, Yun-hun stood in front of the door to Iron's room, wants to report to him about the last news. The guy invited her inside, immediately interested in her successes, which she managed to achieve. Looking at the tablet, the girl said that all shares and assets of the company were sold, which dumbfounded Iron. The guy did not understand whether it was necessary to sell absolutely everything that he received an affirmative answer. In the corporation I have already served my age, so there was no point in pulling it further. They blocked the entrance to the fortress of the Blood King so that no one could use this door. They also came up with a way to keep the company afloat, but a significant part of the shares was already sold out. The further growth of the corporation will be different at hand. Over time, it will be more difficult to sell a share at a good price. So she solved this issue in advance, and Iron was not mistaken in trusting this matter to her. However, this was not all. Yunha also tried to abolish the guilds of Ganha and Nango. Having a look, the girl reminded him of a conversation with the third foreman, which happened a week ago. He said that their guild was influenced by the guild Slassen, which was why he began to endure failure. The guy thought about the fact that now is clearly not the best time to begin to confront them. He was able to capture the fortress of the Bloody King so quickly due to the connection between divine art and occultists. He can lose everything that he worked on if he goes against the guild Slassen. Suddenly, the Keika said in a confident tone that it would be better to start everything from scratch. She plans to create a new guild, which will be built completely from scratch. And she knows that the guilds are already enough, so it even looks careless at first glance. But their bloody cult is no longer the one that was before, so they can begin to act in a new way. However, Iron lowered it to the ground, because maybe they became a bit better. They have enough difficulties. The cult does not get experience. The battle with the monsters in the portal is completely not the same as with people. The girl realized that he was absolutely right, but he encouraged her that there was a way to become stronger. However, he will talk about him only when the time comes, after which he asked her about the name of the guild. The girl immediately blurted out that it would be the Guild of the King, God, and Emperor Iron, but the guy asked to forget about it. At that very moment, she was upset because the master did not want to recognize such a great name. Iron concluded that the guild would be called Yunha, and the girl was dumbfounded, that the name would be in honor of her name. He indicated that she was the leader of the guild, but she was completely sure that her master was a true leader. While the girl was trying to please the master, the guy noticed that she was sometimes too stupid. Perhaps she forgot who he is because Iron cannot do anything outside the fortress. And the haha just fits the steering wheel of the new leader of the guild, because nothing is known about it. Most likely the guild Skasan is still following him, so he should not stick his nose out. Sometime later, a D-rank portal appeared in the Namyangu, which was immediately sealed from ordinary people. Inside him there was a formidable battle of players against zombies, who were not going to retreat. Having pierced one of the monsters, the guy decided that the hunt was completed, but the zombie only grabbed his sword. The blade hit the very heart, but the monster was still alive, which dumbfounded the player. At that very moment, Yun-hai, who destroyed the zombies with several waves of the sword. She threw a bottle to her friend, explained that if we do not cover the weapons with sacred spells, the undead will not die. Other members of her new guild reported that everything was cleaned and the danger has passed. Now they could begin the art of absorption of a bloody demon, even without the participation of Iron himself. The girl at first did not believe that this was generally possible, but the guy convinced her of the opposite. After some time, Iron arrived in a bar where people whispered that one guild has recently been making noise. Many heard about them. It was the Guild of the Hei. There are rumors that they are the heirs of Jungjin Ge. They also discussed that the leader of the squad of the Scarlet Plum of Jung and Wu from the Guild Slasan leaves. At this time, the guy slowly headed for the manager, who was still behind the bar. Making the old client, he asked him to forget about what happened last time, offering him to drink. For such a place, this is quite a common thing, so that some orders are not according to the plan. When Iron devastated a glass of whiskey, he heard the question whether he joined some clan. After all, as he knows, the black market and good relations with a bloody cult. If he is an occultist, then he is unlikely to come with a personal request, so he should have an order from the cult. The manager was sincerely surprised when he heard that the guy needed access to the black market. However, the expression on his face immediately changed to gloomy because he did not have enough powers for such a request. Without hesitation, Iron pulled a medallion out of his pocket, which threw it at a stand in front of a man. The dumbfounded manager began to carefully examine the medallion, not believing that he was a great foreman. But he did not understand how this is possible, but he would have to generously pay for such a request. But instead, the guy said that he has very expensive information for them. Iron's eyes lit up when he said that the bloody demon of this generation was overthrown. The manager could not believe that the bloody demon was overthrown, because this simply cannot be. He spoke as if he knew a lot about the bloody fortress of the king, which was absolutely not so. Such words from Iron's mouth angry a man who was not used to such impudent customers. He knew so much, but did not hear the latest news about the change of the bloody demon. It turns out that the rat started in the palace. The manager began to release internal energy, asking the guy, does he understand what he is doing now? The guy was sure that he was one of the elders or a member of the bloody sect, and the man climbed behind the sword under the counter. Iron immediately felt behind the murderous glances of visitors, from whom it blew a thirst for blood. Now it was no longer so important, but the guy was still interesting about the black market. The manager cannot guarantee any power with his position because he must first report to the top and obtain permission. Iron knew this, and that is why he needs to meet with the Black King. Hearing this, the man and visitors were alarmed, surrounding the guys, sending his weapons to him. He crossed the line, thought out that it could be so easy to shout his name and remain unpunished. They overtook a little because of some name, but because of this, the manager realized that he lied that the foreman. The man found out that the guy was not from a bloody cult, and he wondered what goal he pursues. If Iron tells them the truth, then they are ready to let him go, but the manager's blade has already pierced his throat. The guy calmly drew attention to the fact that his blood flows, but the blade entered deeper. When his blood reached the man's hand, his body immediately pierced burning pain, and veins appeared on him. The blood of real followers of the sect is resistant to poison, so it is useless to put it with poisoned whiskey. After all, this poison may well lead to the death of anyone who is in contact with it so often. He handed the rest that he would not kill him, because he did not want the connections between the Black King and the Blood Sect to completely fall apart. Iron has the right to see the Black King, because the past bloody demon saved the Black King life. While the guy was talking about this, a huge puddle of blood began to gather under his feet. To repay for salvation, the Black King helped the bloody cult for a long time. At the same moment, from the blood that was on Earth, bloody needles that surrounded visitors began to be created. Then Iron announced that he was a new bloody demon, which everyone did not believe at first. Suddenly a voice appeared from somewhere, who stated that the guy really had the right to meet. Iron was surprised that the king himself watched them all this time, but did not show up. At that very moment, he recalled the bloody needles and saved the manager from the poison, doing the favor. A few minutes later, the manager entered the guy on the nightclub, which was cursed by people. Turning around at Iron, the man thought he was worried because he was a bloody demon. All the same, he is just the lord of the fallen world. For the Black King, who rules darkness on the whole continent, he is nobody. At that very moment, they went to the door, which were guarded by two serious men. One of them put a hand in front of him, thereby making it clear that they would not go further. The manager could not go further, so he wished the guy good luck, after which Iron was let in. Looking at the guard, the guy thought he was so strong that he was even ridiculous that he was guarding the doors here. People in the bar also attracted him, since most of them are high-ranking members of the Black Sect. At that very moment, the man pointed him to the next door, in front of which the guards stood in 2 rows. Entering inside, Iron was surprised to find that too suddenly, everything around was becoming a normal look. A man sitting opposite him asked for his apology, because he did not want to scare him. He is an important figure, so the guard is especially strong because he is the master of this place, the Black King. When Iron crouched, the man offered him to drink a magnificent drink that was ready. He politely refused, because it still does not intoxicate due to too strong immunity to harmful substances. When asked why he wanted to see him, the guy recalled that he had been helping a bloody cult all the time. The Black King took a sip, after which he explained that kindness is still valued in the world. Iron decided that he was carrying some nonsense, because it is obvious that there is another reason. Information about the change of bloody demon was quite valuable. She explained many oddities. He also already knew that now Khan Chol was in a bloody cult, which means that not all rats died. At that very moment, the man reminded him of the surviving foreman who told him about this. At the moment, they were considered comrades in the exchange of such information. Although he was a fool who had long lagged from time to time, he passed any news in a timely manner. The appointment of Khan Chol as the leader of the cult was the right decision. Thanks to this, the influence of the development of the Guild of the Ha-Ha is expanding. It turns out that now the bloody demon leader of the bloody cult acts together. Iron recalled that the rules of the black market imply a fee for any information. It was really so, but the Black King now had too many questions. And all these issues will now be directed directly to Iron, who came to him personally. The captain of the team of the guild of the volcano Shinhan died at the place of burial of monsters. He went there. I heard about the death of one of the slaves. On the same day, a huge hole was found in the ceiling. At the same time, someone came from the black market, mentioned the case that occurred 5 years ago, and accepted the order. It so coincided that the slave, that Shinhan was so concerned, just got into the guild 5 years ago, which was not a coincidence. Iron did not believe in a coincidence or fate. He builds his future with his own hands. The Black King was surprised that the guy deliberately left hints of himself, and he was much more interesting than he thought. But the guy went so far only thanks to him. It is difficult for him to find out everything about him on his own. Such a statement caused a man's laughter, and his reaction was a little brighter than expected. Wipe the tears. The Black King seemed magnificent, and it seemed to him that they would work. Under the gaze of the guy, the man broke his arms to the sides, asking with interest what he needed. Sometime later, the Black King headed for another office, after which he knocked the knee in front of the mistress. Now he perfectly understood why she was so interested in this unusual person. An ordinary player got the power of a martial artist, but it is unclear how he became a bloody demon. Yes, and little is known about his past. Perhaps he really is the same legendary bloody god. At first he thought that this was the work of the Guild of the Volcano, but they even really knew anything about him. Moreover, they are still not aware of how the development of an ordinary player to such a level. Suddenly the mistress trembled, said that he could not be a man. Everything is simple. It is a monster. The girl asked to promise him everything that he would wish, after which he could come to her personally. Looking at her reflection in the window, she could not believe that he had finally appeared. Toward evening, Iron was in Villa Conchal in Namyanju, thinking about the past meeting. He was interested in learning more about their strength, but not so much. Remembering the Black King, he realized that he would definitely not be able to cope with that guy now. But still, he was convinced that they would never have helped the cult for without a good reason. Heavenly sects and bloody, but from ancient times a secret, one group helped the bloody cult are equally important. Iron remembered that her name was Hao Moon, but he could not find out more. The next day, the guy met his guest, to whom Yunha reacted with an undisguised shock. Before them sat the Black King, shining with joy, causing Iron the question of why he came. With the investments, everything was decided, and the bloody sect needs changes because a new bloody demon has appeared. Any good investor knows that it is worth investing in adventures with great potential. Yunha immediately nervous, not knowing where to go, and what to do with such an important guest. She then informed the master that investment conditions are incredibly beneficial for them, so much so that it is even suspicious. You cannot even sell the company, because it will be enough for everything. Iron asked her to move away, after which he suggested that the Black King talk alone. When they were left alone, the guy decided to ask directly why he actually came. The man replied that he was simply studying the possibilities of investing, but Iron did not believe him. He was interested in what he implies when he was talking about the guild, but Saming thought he already knew it. The bloody demon has a lot of secrets, and they, the black market, are extremely curious. Therefore, he just wants to make sure everything personally so that this information does not leak out. Raising his index finger up, Iron asked if he was sure that this was not an order from above. The Black King frowned, not understanding what he was talking about because he is the king of the black market. He smiled. The guy suggested that if there is a king, then there should be an emperor. With humor, everything was bad for him, but he continued to ask if the king could pace like that. A good company is functioning perfectly without a leader, which the guy began to envy a little. The man asked him not to worry because since he intervened personally, the bloody sect is waiting for the same. They already have access to the black market, and therefore they can use it freely. However, Iron had not received anything yet, and does not know what access was being discussed. But everything was not so simple. The black market is a place of secret information from around the world, and access allows you to be there. However, since the bloody demon cannot easily reveal his personality, he will temporarily act as his representative. It was very beneficial for Iron, and therefore he hastened to ask how things were with the search. Simin was just about to talk about it, after which he announced that the magician was finally found. This happened in Bondino, and Iron was the same as this guy, but he really thought he was dead. The Black King laid the phone in front of him, saying that there was a problem. The location of the Armo was disclosed. It is located on the island of Ganchi, and this is the territory of the Guild of Haines, which complicates their task. At this time, on the island of Yuksegul, the foreman of the Guild Han greeted everyone who came. Other people were very happy to see him, proudly calling him a lightning, fast sword. Everyone loudly greeted him, being sure that since he was here, everything will become easier. Suddenly, one of those present closed loudly, saying that this foreman was very annoying. But when the guy noticed that Sagul heard everything, he immediately got nervous, not expecting to overheard him. At that very moment, the man went to him and hit his stomach, forcing the guy to fall to the ground. Getting a sword from the scabbard, the man announced that his head was full of demonic thoughts. Therefore, right now, he will personally save him from the energy of the demon. But the guy immediately began to pray for mercy. As soon as Sagul waved his sword, one of the warriors immediately stood in front of the guy, trying to stop him. The lightning sword immediately realized that this guy is one of the people of the leader of the guild Godin Kan Chol Y. However, this will not stop him because such is his duty as a righteous master of the sword. But the other leader of the guild put his hand on his heart, vouching for the fact that he was not connected with the demon. The man promised to prove it in the dungeon, after which Sagul folded his sword in the scabbard, decided to trust him. After that, it was announced that the visit would soon begin, so it was necessary to finish with the preparation. Chol Yol handed his hand to his subordinate, justifying everything that they are just miserable dogs for them. They become stronger through training and insight, and they, ordinary players, only by killing monsters. You do not know how to bite. Do not bark. This is the only principle of survival in this world. After that, the leader drew attention to the guy standing nearby. We decide that he was from the Shadow Guild. He heard about them. It seems that they only recently appeared, so he asked to be careful if they want to survive. Iron, which changed the color of the hair and eyes, agreed with it, imperceptibly using bloody equipment. The key is located at the Hans Guild. Min wanted to deal with everything on his own, but a detachment was already formed. There are 2 exits. The first is to disguise yourself under members of the Ghostly Guild and join the detachment. The second is to steal the key. But each of the possible options was quite risky. This is quite real, Iron should only say, and he will immediately order to find the key. However, the guy was in no hurry to give an answer, suggesting that now he is quite impudently checked. If he asked for such a thing, Min would definitely set a good price, but he did not want to owe such a trifle. The Black King asked if he understood that they were carrying an investment on their part. Then he decided to adhere to the first way, asking to prepare people who are ready to join the detachment. After that, the man headed for the exit, wishing the guy good luck, which was not particularly required for him. Iron did not even budge. I think that Min will not be able to behave so forever. In fact, it is not necessary to experience here but the Black King, who pursues some goal. Meanwhile, on the island of Ganch, in the dungeon, the master of the sword destroyed the wall, opening a new passage. The subordinates were delighted with the foreman, who alone defeated such a thick wall. However, the man only looked at them menacingly, ordered to move forward since one could not lose a minute. Such an orderly tone could not spoil everyone's mood, because of which everyone immediately moved on. Now the intelligence detachment had to carefully study the dungeon and then report everything. This dungeon was created by magicians, so you need to be neat, because you can get into a trap. At that very moment, one of the guys carefully stepped forward, going straight to the print. At that very moment, the whole corridor lit up bright light, but the guy managed to save in time. The worried leader asked Minho whether he was in order, in response to which he heard an apology. However, now it was superfluous, because the main thing is that he survived and can take a medical potion. Having examined the subordinates, he gladly noticed that they were not very wounded, and they were very lucky. Sagul was dissatisfied with the picture seen, because these idiots could not even dodge this. And now it was not the time to whine, after which he urged everyone to go to the next zone. But if they do not deal with the wounded, then there will be only more problems, so they need a respite. If they had not been trapped, all this would not have been, so the foreman decided to give them one chance. Sagul announced a short break, after which he urged everyone to gather in order to heal. Suddenly, a wounded leader drew attention to people from the Guild of Shadows, who were intact and sound. There was not a single scratch on them, and not even dust, which caused some fears. The man suggested that they use some special item, probably he's very expensive. One of Iron's subordinates noted that the leader of the Guild Gildan has been looking at the master for a long time. But this is not important, because Bondo is not the easiest opponent. It will not be easy to break through this dungeon. If the moment turns up, they will deal with the leader later, without attracting special attention. At that very moment, the scout came running to them, announcing that they had found a way out, which was very on time. However, they stumbled upon the problem, and when they got to it, they noticed a magic circle for sacrifices. Now it would be better to retreat, bring the masters and deactivate it for the sake of safety. However, Sagul decided differently, after which he ordered everyone to move aside, taking out his sword. He was sure that they could destroy this miserable magic trap with one of his skills. But when the cloud of dust was dispelled, the man in shock noticed that the magic circle remained unharmed. He did not understand where he was here, so far from the western lands, because they could not retreat so simply. At the same second, The leader of the guild, Godin, advised him to do just that in order not to risk it. But Sagul decided that if it was a magic circle of sacrifice, then they can simply sacrifice someone. It seemed that this old man was completely crazy, because right now he gave a man a chance to die with honor. He tried to explain that they are engaged in reconnaissance, so they have all these extra victims. However, there were no guarantees that magic would sit quietly all the time, and they could get out and hurt their comrades. The master of the sword doubted that they, useless idiots, would be able to resist them and get out alive. At that very moment, the old man put a sword in front of him, announcing that he who disagreed would be killed by him personally. After that, he turned to the leader of Chulwu, who just promised to prove that he was not a traitor. Sagul looked at him menacingly, ordering to choose who would become a victim in the name of their salvation. Looking at the blade, Chulwu thought that he was a player all his life, preparing himself for death. But he was not ready to die from the greed of these garbage, which made his death so miserable. Until the last, he doubted that such a destruction is to match him, because he felt like a hero. Right now, he could not choose someone specific, when suddenly his voice in his head suggested telling how to survive. Upon learning of this voice, the man turned around, noticing behind the same guy from the Guild of Shadow. It was surprising that he uses telepathy, because an ordinary player cannot use military equipment. Sagul thought that he could not choose someone from the guild, so he decided to choose someone else. Iron mentally ordered him to do the way he said, then he would have a chance. He will not be offended if he offers him as a victim. He just needs to follow his instructions. Chulwu did not understand what was happening, wondering that this guy did not care about his own life. Sagul continued to rush him while Iron said that if he wants to die, he could continue to stand like that. Clutching his hands into a fist, the leader of the guild decided that he did not want to die, so he put forward the Shadow Guild. One of Iron's subordinates was beside himself from rage, asking for permission to pile. Having received a refusal, they, along with the rest of the members, got into a magic circle, expecting what would happen next. However, nothing happened, and the seal was not activated, which was dumbfounded by Chulwu. If the magical circle of sacrifice is strong enough to block its technique, then there will be few victims. It turns out that the magicians are so strong that the sacrifice becomes more important, and the closet needs to choose the next victim. Looking at the foreman with displeasure, the man mentally asked him not to build himself righteous. Meanwhile, Iron mentally gave him the team choose the one whom he wants to save. The man did not understand how he could save someone who would stand in the magical circle of sacrifice. But judging by his expression, the guy decided that he did not understand, so he decided to repeat what was said. Chulwu did not know what to do because it is very difficult to believe in something like that. Sagul rushed him, justifying this by the fact that they do not have time, and he needs to choose a victim. Even if he survives without becoming a victim, these scum will still kill all the remaining. No one wants a rumor that the dungeon was cleaned with the help of the victim of the players. Therefore, he sent Minho forward, while other members of the guild began to offer their candidacy. They worried about Minho, who only graduated from school, but the leader ordered everyone to close his mouths. Clutching the fist to the blood, the man firmly decided that there was no chance, so he hurried his comrade. I thought that the leader made the right decision because he was always a useless burden. But now he was glad that he could finally be useful to the guild, so he thanked the leader. As soon as the guy entered the magic circle, nothing happened again, because of which everyone exhaled in relief. However, joy did not last long because still someone had to sacrifice himself. Sagul again demanded that Chulwu offer other victims until the circle was activated. After a while, everyone, except for him and the leader of John, had already entered the circle, but he was never activated. He never heard of such a large magic circle that appeared in such a small dungeon. Suddenly, Chulwu suggested that this guy did something with a circle, but did not know that the player was capable of this. However, if he really has such a force, then he really has a chance to save himself and comrades. At that very moment, Iron announced that the time to choose the last, and this is the last chance to survive. The man will lie if he says that he does not want to live. He flattered these people all this time to survive. But at the moment, he cannot sacrifice others for himself. Otherwise, it will be the rest of his life to reproach himself for it. At that very moment, the man bowed and apologized to the leader of Giyan because he will be a victim. But contrary to the conviction that he expected to hear, the old man asked him to raise his head. All this time he wanted to become a victim, but Chulwu until the last did not call his name. But he is curious why he, who always cared for his guild, is now making such a choice. Without waiting for an answer, he put his hand on his shoulder, almost there, that he should have personal reasons. Chulwu understood that he would remember him as a disgusting person, that he sacrificed his comrades for his own sake. But now it does not matter, because everyone still cannot be saved, so you need to hope only for a miracle. Let him live all his life like a dog to reach such peaks, but he would not die with a miserable death. At that very moment, The man was surprised to notice the thoughtful guy standing in the middle of the circle. Iron said that the victims were still not enough, but he was curious what choice Chul-Wu would make in the end. The man mentally insulted him, while Sagul specified that his turn had come. Waiting for the last person, the master of the sword put his hand on his heart, promising not to forget these victims. When Chul-Wu went forward, he asked the old man not to say stupid things, because no one would believe it anyway. At this time, the smiling Iron rushed the leader Godin to take his place. In response to this, Chul-Wu strictly looked at him, asking, and whether he was sure that everyone would survive here. Without hearing an unequivocal answer, everyone present with surprise noticed the activation of the magic circle. Those who stood aside asked others to prepare because now everything will begin. But at the same moment they noticed that something went wrong, and the dungeon around the press began to crumble. Iron said out loud that the fate of those who made others sacrifice themselves. While Chul-Wu was in shock, Iron clarified that there was originally such a magic circle. When you make a victim, the passage explodes, missing those who initially had to die. The man could not imagine how he knew this, but the guy again did not give a specific answer. However, they were lucky that the number of victims coincides with the number of players. Otherwise, some could also be there. With his calm expression, Iron said that only one victim was needed, then dumbfounded a man. He cannot yet destroy the old ones or create a new magic circle, but it is quite easy to change it. The guild leader could not believe that an ordinary player could modify the magic circle with the help of aura. But before he could ask how this is possible, as a friend noticed the surviving master of the sword. Sagul asked only one question: who this guy is, attacking him with his water technique. However, Iron remained standing still, did not even get into his hands from his pockets. At that very moment, his subordinate jumped out in front of him, who cut enemy equipment with one wave of sword. The members of the Guild of Shadow began to ask the old man how he dares to intervene in internal energy. At first, the man did not understand what was being discussed, after which he realized that they were masters of martial arts. They hid their personality and penetrated the detachment to harm them, and now they have become their enemies. Paying attention to the sword, Iron realized that it was thanks to him around Saguli that everyone survived. Creating a bloody sphere in front of him, the guy decided to see if they could continue to resist. Suddenly, one of the subordinates offered to rely on him so that he would do all the work. After that, he turned to the master of the sword, almost revealing the title of his master, but Iron stopped him. The guy explained that they dared to touch his essence, and he could not just stand aside. Having his hand, Iron agreed, because it seems that they are suitable opponents for him. The warrior immediately thanked him. Remember the very first day of the appearance of a bloody demon. Then he committed a terrible sin, not recognizing the true bloody lord, and handed his sword against him. So he can at least atone for his sin, going to defend his master. He called on the rest of the Guild of the Shadow, deciding to get rid of enemies on their own. Such speeches were angry with the master of the sword, who decided that they completely forgot who he was. Having waved his sword, the old man recalled that he was Foreman Yuksagul Great Guild Hens. His blade collided with the sword of the subordinate Iron, who promised that his sinful soul would be washed with blood. The rest of the guild members were not going to stand aside, and therefore also rushed to the attack. Meanwhile, Iron carefully sat down on the floor, watching the battle with indifference. Chul-Wu decided to offer them his help, but the guy only asked him in surprise. At that very moment, the man looked at the battle, noting that they did not need their help at all. This new guild defeated Hanam's warriors, which seemed an unattainable level for them. This was especially true for Saguli, and now they watched the amazing ownership of the sword. Suddenly, Iron reported that he needed experience points, which surprised Chul-Wu. The guy explained that it was time for them to understand what modern martial art is. While Sagul fought with his opponent, he suddenly became alarming, although this guy is clearly weaker. However, looking at him, there was an extraordinary calm in the air, which strained him. Having dodged the next blow, the old man decided to ask if he enters the sleep section. However, this guy was weak. He must have trained little, and could not reach the desired level. Therefore, the old man decided that it was time to show the real art of the sword Han. The subordinate Iron immediately noticed that the expression on the face of the master of the sword has changed. It was obvious that he wanted to end everything. His whole appearance only spoke about it. And when the guy missed, it was surprised because he was definitely aiming at the open zone. The old man suddenly added in speed, after which he sharply found himself behind the enemy. The guy was dumbfounded with a similar increase in speed, and in the last second he managed to dodge the wave of the sword. At the same moment, Sagul increased its strength, and even the earth began to fall under his feet. The warrior tried to reflect the blow. He managed to take the sword aside, but at the same moment he received a blow with his foot. He threw him a few meters back, and he tried to understand what he did to increase speed and strength. But this was not yet the end, since the master of the sword raised the blade up, activating the use of internal power. Energy began to rage around him, and when he returned to the attack again, he was able to knock the guy off his feet. He did not understand what was happening, but this is quite natural, because just a minute ago he was stronger on his head. Having waved his sword, the old man decided to personally enlighten such an idiot who decided to compete with him. It was the power of divine weapons, which the master of the sword is not used against weaklings. However, the subordinate only thought that he was experiencing a terrible humiliation before the bloody demon. Getting angry, he was ready to kill the old man, but he only continued to mock the warrior. At that very moment, Sagul activated rage, after which he again found himself behind the opponent. It was the emotion that it was not subject to weaklings, and the guy did not have time to dodge the attack. And when the blade practically reached the goal, the master of the sword stopped, feeling that his body was not obeying. Going towards the subordinate, Iron asked if he understood the difference between him and other warriors. This old man is nothing. In Henom there are 100 warriors much stronger, and they have a much more powerful equipment. Now it is clear to him what price we'll have to pay if you continue to believe that soldiers should not rely on their weapons. The guy also bowed his head, taking a valuable lesson from the master, and agreed with his every word. At that very moment, Saguli, a trembling, made a shiver when he tried to move at least a finger. He felt too cruel aura, after which he suggested that it was demonic energy. He suppressed the thirst for murder, but his body still does not obey, when suddenly the guy decided to thank the old man. Indeed, thanks to him, he realized the burden of his sins, and now he was ready to finally learn the lesson. It was his reckoning. The master of the sword asked him to stop, but the warrior ignored him and his head. As soon as everything happened, the guy said that it would not hurt, but Sagul did not have time to hear. At that very moment, the guy ordered the bloody detachment to get rid of the rest of the traitors. After that, the bloody massacre began, during which none of the subordinates of the master of the sword survived. Chul Wu thought that they said that they would show him the path to survival, so he held out his hand. But initially they were the main threat, a whole detachment of demons, which penetrated their group. The man dumbfounded as Iron slowly headed for him, not knowing what to do. His legs could not stand it, and he fell to his knees, deciding to try to pray him for mercy. However, the guy simply passed him, after which he turned around, calmly calling him. While Chulvu departed from shock, Iron got to huge doors, staring at them. Without thinking twice, he decided to open them, when suddenly a bright and dazzling light poured from the inside. When they went inside, subordinates suggested that there could still be traps, so he decided to go forward. Iron dissuaded him, explaining that there would be no more traps because everything has a limit. However, the warrior doubted, because he rarely thought about the limit regarding such things. People call it a dungeon, but in fact this is a fragment of the destroyed world, just like a castle of a bloody demon. The destroyed world must be maintained, and the price of the dungeon is extra resources. After the creation of such a grandiose, sacrificial magic circle, there were no means left for the dungeon. There is nothing that the bloody demon does not know, because at one time he led the whole guild. Now he was absolutely sure that in the future nothing threatens them anymore. Suddenly the guy pierced the sensation from the time when he was refueling with a guild. Then he raised his eyes, finding several magic circles in front of him, depending in the air. Suddenly people in the mantles who were the creators of these spells appeared near them. Chul Wu decided to cover his comrades, but it was useless, because the magic circles were everywhere. The man wondered why they do not activate magic circles when they drove them into a trap. At that very moment, one of the magicians looked at Iron, who manipulated with his blood. When the guy touched her with a magic circle, he began to spark, which urged them to be careful. If you try to deactivate circles now, mana will flow in the opposite direction. The old wizard was shocked that this guy found the center of magic circles destroyed not one, but at once all the axes. Iron decided not to explain anything, offering the magicians to feel everything themselves, but they began to stop him. Magic circles began to fade, and one of the wizards headed in his direction. The frowning blonde decided to ask if he destroyed the magical circle of sacrifices. Iron gave an affirmative answer, and at the same moment he thought that he had found the one he was looking for. The great magician Bondo, he was born the heir to Armo, but was able to form only 3 magic circles. He had a stream of mana, but he overcame this and became a real genius among magicians. At this time, Bondeno tried to understand how the guy was able to know the type of magic circle completely unknown to him. The question also arose that he forgot among the warriors, when Iron suddenly stated that he had the same stupid expression on his face. The blonde was sincerely surprised, while he added that the hairstyle, too, was clearly not to match the magician. The wizard frowned even more, trying to understand how this person knew him. The guy tried to remind him, saying that he had come to save him, and memories immediately surged on the guy. Once upon a time, Iron ran away from 3 pursuers who fled behind him on his heels. Suddenly, someone called him behind him, because of which the guy immediately turned into a narrow lane. When the pursuers turned in this direction, they noticed that their goal disappeared. They quickly suggested that the guy jump to the other side, after which they decided to continue to chase after him. At this time, Bondo deactivated the masking magic circle, making them visible with iron. Without wasting time, the guy thanked the wizard because he saved him, risking his life. However, now he himself is in danger, so he is better off leaving as soon as possible. The blonde immediately recognized Iron, a comrade of the killer in him, but the guy was not afraid. He was sincerely surprised that the wizard knew who he was, because he did not particularly run about himself. He decided to find out where the magician knows him, but he only answered that they are similar to him. After that, Bondo invited him to follow him because he could help him get out. Iron did not arrange such an ambiguous answer, so he asked him to explain in more detail. For some time, the pursuers still overtook them, and now they threatened the blonde. Iron managed to seriously injure, because of which he was lying on the floor, bleeding while the man talked with the magician. The guy tried to understand how they found them, because they did not even understand that they were attacked. The last thing Iron remembered was that the warrior waved his sword, directing him to Bondo. And now the magician was interested in why he came to save him, because they were not even familiar. Iron smiled, answering that they were just like him. This phrase made the blonde start. Without believing his eyes, the wizard began to come closer to examine the interlocutor more in detail. The guy practically did not notice the resemblance to that Iron, whom he had known once long ago. This man was the last whom Bondo expected to meet, because he knew that he was into slavery to the guild Skasan. But at the same moment, the guy surprised him even more, asking why he saved him. Still wants to know the answer. All betrayed him, even those to whom he trusted the most that left a deep trace in his soul. However, the magician risked his life, not knowing him, and helped to get out of a fairly heavy trouble. The blonde replied that for him he was a hero, which surprised Iron, but did not cause any emotions on his face. At that time, Bondo left Armo in desperate attempts to save his own life. However, the brutal struggle with injustice gave him strength. That's how it was. Suddenly, Iron remembered the question of King's sword, whether he wants everything to disappear. And now he was ready to answer negatively, because there was something else left. A person who believed all this time in him. The guy held out his hand to the wizard, saying that he had saved him, and he, in turn, would help him. Iron invited him to go with him to cope with the hardships that expect them ahead. The blonde trembled by a sudden, because he thought it was the end when Guild Haynes found the passage. But now he was sincerely glad that they were alive, after which he cried, and thanked Iron for it. The guy clarified that in order to survive, he would have to leave Armo, hoping that there is nothing wrong with this. But everything was in the way, because this is all only in his head, and the rest does not matter to him. Other wizards were outraged, but Bondo explained that the second detachment was waiting for them outside, and to survive, he would have to leave. This place stores a huge story, so the wizards suggested trying to protect this place. Looking at them, Iron thought they were the same fools as in the palace of the Bloody King. These people who have not seen the real world only rot in place are not able to step over themselves. But now he was wondering what Bondo would do, and what answer would give his comrades. Pointing to Iron, the blonde asked how to ask those who put their lives in order to save them, to take risks again. They are not able to stop these people, and even more so, they will not be able to cope in a fight with a whole guild. If they all die, no one will remember the history of Armo, so this makes no sense. At that very moment, Iron entered the conversation, who decided to clarify something to the wizards. He saves only Bondo. He absolutely does not care what will happen to the rest of the magicians. Starting to create bloody spheres, he added that if they intervene, then he get rid of them. The senior wizard, with fear in his eyes, felt the thirst for blood that he really wanted to kill them all. For a while, a pause came, after which the wizards parted, opening the passage to them. Bondo urged his comrades to go forward, after which they silently headed along the huge corridor. Chulwu was dumbfounded that Iron was going to destroy the dungeon. It was a pity that nothing would remain from Armo. But the man was more interested in the fact that if the dungeon disappears, they would all die. Turning around, the guy asked why he was telling him all this, because it is already obvious. Contrary to his pride, Chulwu for the second time fell to him on his knees, asking him to take them with him. As he knows, it is difficult for them to hide, and the Guild of Haynes will sooner or later find them for sure. If they are lucky to hide, then they will forever be separated from their families. After all, it was he who said that he would show how to survive. They are ready to do everything in their power. Iron agreed, but in return asked to promise something. Chulwu immediately began to listen carefully. The guy asked him to never kneel again, because he was already pretty tired of it. The man was shocked that he was originally going to take them, but he could not even think about it. Suddenly Iron began to ask questions whether he was a member of Milcha, and whether they still exist. After thinking a little, the leader of the guild replied that not so long ago he saved several people who were them. Iron was sincerely surprised that someone else stayed from Miltius, but did not show any emotions. Bondo, with a smile, suggested discussing this when they choose and will be safe. A few minutes later, they were in place. It was a hall, in the middle of which there was a magic circle. The blonde stopped Iron because you need to wait a bit while the magic circle is deactivated. The guy replied that there was no time for this, after which he released his blood, which headed towards the circle. The magician tried to stop him because it is much stronger than multi-layer magic circles. One mistake, and they will all die. With a calm look, Iron asked him to shut up and just watch what was happening. Turning his head, the blonde in shock noticed the imposition of a magic circle used by a comrade. Iron could not activate him, so he asked Bondo to do it, but he tried to understand where he learned this. The blonde asked not to say stupidity when he heard that he had learned this from the king of demons. Iron rushed him, while the magician called himself a great genius of his time, and knew that he should do. Crowing out the words of the curse, the wizard noticed that a bright ray of light soared from the center of the circle to the sky. When everything calmed down, Iron slowly went forward, after which he put his hand on the book. Suddenly a window appeared in front of him, which said that Einhardt's fragment was installed, and he can register Armo as the owner. Iron was sure that he had lost the center, and in general he had not seen the system windows for a long time. However, he felt that the center of the system was clearly not inside him, because inside it was only chaos. The guy could not believe that chaos himself acts as the center, which was a little difficult to imagine. Then he asked Bondo. He someday received a notification from the system from the center of the dungeon. This is impossible because he was not a player, but the question arose how then he became the master of the dungeon. The blonde said that he spilled his blood into a magic circle, which Iron had just destroyed. In general, the guy understood the meaning, but it was necessary to try it on himself. At that very moment, he decided to register, after which the book shone with blue energy. Various notifications began to emerge before him, which registered him as a new owner. He was offered to take the post of owner of the castle, although he had already established a connection with his center. Iron suggested that before that he did not fulfill all the conditions, and therefore collided with the inconsistency. Then he decided to re-register, and after a couple of seconds he turned to Bondo. The wizard was surprised to hear that it was not necessary to get rid of Armo, because Iron was offered to unite two worlds. There was nothing to think, so the guy decided to choose the castle of the Bloody King as the main world. At that very moment they were lit up by dazzling light, from which he had to hide behind his hands. Bondo and the subordinate of the Bloody Demon immediately rushed in his direction, trying to save. At the same time, players who were outside, in shock, noticed that the dungeon was gone. When Iron's subordinate came to his senses, he found that he was holding the master tightly by the leg. Next to him lay a wizard who was in the same position, and now quite a few people were watched. The warrior immediately pulled out his sword, wanting to punish the guy who dared to touch the body of the Bloody King, but Iron stopped him. At this time, Chul Wu tried to understand what happened at all, because of a sudden outbreak they were here. At that very moment, a powerful voice was heard near them, who asked if they were representing where they were. Chol did not know how they got here, but he was sure that they would not get out alive. But at the same moment his flame went out when he discovered the captain of the Bloody Sword and asked what he was doing here. At that very moment, Iron approached them, that he simply moved Armo to the castle, thereby preserving it. Ignoring explaining questions, the leader pointed to wizards, introducing them new people. Meanwhile, magicians tried to understand what was happening at all, unable to believe in what was happening. Iron turned to them, asking for a minute. They have a rather tough guard, so he should establish a restriction. After that, he and Chol went deep into the castle, where his center was supposed to be a pond of thousands of blood. But now they were the passage that connected the divine relic with the castle. Only the priestess knows how to open the passage, and they already contacted her, but the guy was not needed. He felt everything from here, after which he extended his hand, forcing blood drops to rise into the air. At the same second, a window appeared, which confirmed the inclusion of a new detachment in the castle of the Bloody King. Iron was offered to move Armo as a castle of the Bloody King and Armo united. Suddenly he was informed that it was possible to expand the world, which meant that the boundaries were mobile. And when he gave the go, ahead to expand, everything began to tremble, as if an earthquake had happened. Meanwhile, people outside were dumbfounded, seeing how the world began to crack and expand. Then the notification came that the expansion of the world was completed, and the guy realized how it works. Now he needed to choose the custodian of the dungeon and appoint him for the castle of the Bloody Demon and for Armo. Then he decided to appoint Chol as the guardian of the dungeon of the castle of the Blood King. As for Armo, he would not want to limit Bondo, so he means the guardian of Old Jekyll. When the appointment was completed, Iron turned around and saw that Chol began to shine, not understanding what was happening. Sometime later, when the guy was sitting on the throne, Chol fell on his knees and began to beat his forehead on the floor. Iron asked him not to rejoice because of this, although what he did could rejuvenate a man. The king's castle without his permission will not be able to leave me. Everything will have his own price. But he became the boss of the dungeon. But Conchal with all his heart was sure that the dedication of the whole life of the sect was a great blessing. He again began to bow to the master and swear to him allegiance, wanting to do this again and again. At that very moment, Jekyll approached him, who was also younger, asking why he received such an honor. The point was that the wizard was the only to whom he could entrust this and be confident in him. The reason was also that he was the only one who knew his name, but this information only frightened the old man. Iron relaxed slightly, suggesting that the man did not like something in the new purpose. However, Jekyll was interested in how so. He not only saved his life, but also gave such a great power. He, the foreman of Armo, speaks for everyone, and therefore thanks the master for saving them. As soon as the man bowed to the guy, he heard that he could leave only with his permission. Let him be the keeper of Armo, but now he also belongs to the castle of the Blood King. This means that now his life is in the hands of the king and the leader of the bloody cult, no matter what happens. But the guy saved his life at the last moment, so he will be grateful to him even just for it. Bondo, who did not stand behind him, noticed that he no longer feels the power of Armo, because Jekyll became the keeper. He was the genius of the century, but now he has neither a circle nor strength, and therefore he thought that he was the end. Noticing that Iron grinned, the blonde immediately began to scream at him, not seeing anything funny in it. Suddenly the guy went to him and put his hand on his shoulder, asking him to stop whining and follow him. Iron smiled and promised that he would help him return all the lost force that the magician lacked so much. After a moment, they turned out to be in a completely different place, and Bondo could not believe Iron's words. In fact, the wizard could not even think that the guy would be useful to him. But everything is much more complicated. The blonde never heard that the magic circle could be restored. However, Iron was sure that it was often quite real, after which he put his hand in front of him, creating bloody needles. He himself will definitely not cope, so he will need the help of a comrade who lost part of his strength. When patterns appeared on the floor, the guy explained that he still could not activate his magic circle. Bondo was in shock and could not believe that this magic circle was contracted. Now it was the main thing that he could trust Iron, who clearly conceived something. The magician was clearly confident that the contract and magic circle can be used only by the demons of Gina. He did not want to believe that Iron became a demon, but the guy explained that he was not created by this circle. This is the work of his teacher, who was the queen of demons. But he decided not to talk about this to the wizard. Iron decided to explain everything later, while the blonde thought that in this case it was quite real. The contract magic circle takes power. The higher the price, the more power it will bring. So now the guy expected what price a wizard could offer to activate a circle. Thinking, Bondo replied that he has only one valuable thing that he could sacrifice. He is ready to put his life and give his soul. At the moment when he decided to save him, he had already put his life on the concert. Smiling viciously, the magician suggested that Iron would not leave that geek alive. When the guy nodded, Bondo extended his hand in front of him to begin to help activate the magic circle. Meanwhile, the outside Conchol began to experience his new skills, forcing the trees to grow rapidly. To restore materials, there should be enough, which is why the subordinates began to thank him. After that, work began to boil, during which the workers began to rebuild the building. At that very moment, Conchal turned to the captain, announced that everything was going fine, and the construction would end faster. All this was thanks to the leader of the cult, because if he had not brought a bloody demon, it would be much more difficult to live. The master himself directed him, but he did nothing. They must try his best to thank him for mercy. He heard that the bloody demon went into solitude with the magician Bondo, but it is not known for what purpose. He is already at the limit of his strength, but wants to become even stronger, which caused respect in him. But suddenly he heard behind him a loud explosion, which was accompanied by a violet flame. Conchal turned around in shock, realizing that there was a training room where Iron was. At that very moment, he felt heavenly demonic energy that came from that side. When they headed for that place, Conchal began to call the bloody demon, noticing the silhouette among the purple fog. Before the back, he immediately grabbed the sword. I am interested in a formidable tone who he was. Contrary to the tense atmosphere, Conchal wanted to find a bloody demon first. If this person was able to inflict at least some nonsense to him, then he will personally destroy him with his own hands. At that very moment, a man opposite asked what he was so surprised, once ran here. They were surprised to learn the master who forgot to mention the existence of heavenly demonic energy. Then the guy stated that he was a heavenly demon and a bloody demon, thereby dumbfounding his subordinates. This was the first teaching of his teachers, and the first structure for becoming a vessel of chaos. But unlike internal physical strength, the body is still human, and a small movement can make it explode. Divine demonic art makes the body strong enough to withstand a crowded internal power. But the demon also needs help. We need the power of cults from the sect of heavenly demons, as for forging iron in the forge. Thinking about this, you replied that they were disconnected from them for too long. Even more, they have never been connected and have always been at enmity with each other. And that is why iron needs their help. Only they can activate this. Bondo was dumbfounded when he saw a holy magic circle, which is used by 3 sects of Einhart. It is not possible to just take and create, like the contract circles of hell, and he did not know how the guy did it. However, now Iron was worried only whether the wizard could activate him, even if he did not want to create it, and if he makes a mistake, he may not stand and die. Iron all this time is trying to offer himself to chaos, so death cannot be an obstacle. He again asked the wizard to activate him since he had no other way out. Bondo worried that if something went wrong, Iron would blame him for everything, but the guy asked him not to worry. As soon as the wizard began activation, his body was pierced by terrible pain, which was not going to retreat. A magic circle also appeared on Iron's body, which came from his chest, distributed throughout his body. At that very moment, the guy's body was covered with wounds, from which he began to whip the blood in all directions. He was also pierced by terrible pain, and because of which he could not restrain himself and shouted loudly. Bondo wanted to stop this, but Iron did not allow, because even contrary to they should continue activation. An ordinary person would lose consciousness dozens of times from such pain, but Iron could even talk to him. He kept only because of his obsession with revenge, which gave him extraordinary forces. The guy remembered the master who gave the warmth to an orphan who had never had parents. He gave him a place where he could return after his betrayal broke. He wanted to feel it warm again, and therefore he could not stop halfway. Martial arts cannot exist in double forms, just like heavenly demons could not get the art of double energy. But now the bloody demon has both the energy of the demon of blood and the energy of the heavenly demon. Yuen's notable to go to him, Chol decided to ask if he was able to unite 2 demons in himself. From the very beginning, divine arts have never been separated. They have always been one. Everything comes from one beginning, the divine demon, which was now in the person of Iron. He wanted to show him, but at first he decided to move to a less destroyed place, and also ordered Bondo to take Bondo. When they stopped opposite the huge wall, the guy decided that this place would be perfect for them. Iron pulled a fist in front of him, barely waving them, but this power was enough to create a stream of wind. But that was not all. At the same second, a portal appeared in front of them, which began to look for reality. After another moment, the portal shone with a dazzling blue color, from which Chol had to close his eyes to back.